I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty. I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty. I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty.
But I mean, like, what does it take for y'all to see through these people? I don't even understand it. Like, what's the point of even talking about it? I could have told you that dude was a goober tard, a goblin, a demon, and a goober tard.
The Council of Ephesus did not say that you cannot text a girl with a very plump booty. I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty. I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty.
I don't even want to spend any time in the loser sphere.
I was texting with the plump booties. Could I send you some more texts?
Oh, I already told you it was a goober tard.
I can't believe that the losers were acting like the losers that they are. What? Losers were acting like losers?
I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty. I will grease you up. Very good. You have a very plump booty.
Well, Voice of Reason's got a point.
You have a very plump booty. The Council of Ephesus made an error when it said that you can't talk about plump booties. I would like a plump booty on my face. This is Voice of Reason.
Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion.
But the Dark Ages was a time when black people ruled Europe. So when you go into the real history, you'll see King James was...
That's King James right there. That's James LeBron. That's King LeBron right there.
black. He was not a white guy. You'll see his whole lineage of kings.
Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion.
Who was a homosexual himself, who was in love with his sister Lucretia, who they made the image of Lucretia to be Mary. And that became the Renaissance era.
Lucretia.
So hold on, you telling me Lucretia? That's a black name right there. How you gonna say that the people that was framing the black people were also black? That don't make no sense. Lucretia is a black as hell name. Lucretia. The church even allowed it, you know what I'm saying? The church allowed for straight pimping. That have been suppressed. Listen to my brother. In the 1500s, it was legal to be a pimp. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion. Black kings, black bishops, black players, people of the chocolate persuasion.
It's that booger whistle, man. Let's see. Marks and traits of the cult guru. They do not typically like you doing well. What?
They are persecuting me. They do not have spiritual eyes to see. Therefore, they must take down what they do not understand.
That's that booger whistle, baby. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby. I got a booger whistle flute. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby. Oftentimes, the communal living that the guru demands doesn't match up to the guru who's driving around in a freaking Rolls Royce. What? How many swamis got a dang Rolls Royce? What?
I had vision last night. The ascended masters came down to me. They says, Swami, you are to get Rolls Royce.
That's that booger whistle, baby. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby. I got a booger whistle flute. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby. How many Rolls Royces you got? Get over there in that communal living. By the way, get out of my Rolls Royce. I heard he's got 14 Rolls Royces. And by Monday, he would have 15. That's that booger whistle, baby. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby. I got a booger whistle flute. They're energy vampires. That's that booger whistle, baby.
You are in a cult. You are not in a church. You invented your own church.
Excuse me, you're just making an assumption that all the saints agree.
They do. They do. I can go read them. You have no saints. You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer.
You're just making an assumption.
You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. Have no saints. A demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer.
You're just making an assumption. Are all the councils inspired and inerrant?
The ecumenical synods, yes.
So all the ecumenical synods are inspired and inerrant.
Correct.
How do you know?
Because the Holy Spirit leads us to know the truth.
How do you know the Holy Spirit leads you to know the truth?
Because they're in accord with all the other ecumenical doctrines, all the other testimonies of the saints and the scriptures.
You're just making an assumption.
You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer tard.
You're just making an assumption.
You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. Have no saints. A demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer tard.
You're just making an assumption.
You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer tard. Have no saints. You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
A demon, a boomer tard. You're a goblin, a demon, a boomer tard.
You're just making an assumption.
A demon, a boomer tard. A boomer
You're just making an assumption.
goblin, a demon, a boomer tard. A demon, a boomer tard.
Excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
Demon, a
What's up? Welcome, everybody. It's going to be open forum for the next bit. If you have questions, comments, challenges, today is your day. We're going to be focusing, of course, on Roman Catholicism, Roman Catholic arguments, claims, challenges, drama. Everybody now loves the drama. And we're going to be responding to Trent Horn's recent video and claims. Apparently, something has really shook the Roman Catholic domain. They have come out of the woodworks all of a sudden with nothing to do with theology. So they don't, I think, realize this, but this is actually a victory for us because the shift into the obsession on piety signaling and supposedly personal conduct is a telltale sign that people are giving up on the last several years of intensive theological debate. In fact, first thing I want to note is that many Roman Catholics are saying, why did you block Trent Horn? Trent was probably willing to debate you. You may not be aware of the history. Trent is not willing to debate. If we scroll down here a bit, you will see the last exchange that we had. And of course, this was after multiple requests. So this was one of three, if I recall, requests for Trent Horn to do a debate on an argument that I actually believe is a kill shot. And the reason I think this is a kill shot is that if a better explanation for the actions of the papacy in the last millennium, and in particular the last century, if a better explanation ends up being that its actions are explained by geopolitical power and influence, then that means that it doesn't make sense to think that infallibility and indefectibility were conferred upon a crime syndicate. So if I can prove that the Vatican has for a long time been co-opted and become a crime syndicate, you must now, as a Roman Catholic, defend the position that Jesus wills us to be giving our children's future, giving tithes, etc., to a goblin sect, a bunch of organized crime figures. Now, I'm speaking chiefly of Rome. I'm not talking about most local Roman Catholic churches. In terms of the people in general, they tend to be good-hearted, well-meaning people. The problem, of course, is the subversion that has occurred at the top of the Roman Catholic system in their office of the papacy. That is not a new subversion. It is a subversion that is very easily documentable. It's very easily provable from a lot of geopolitical texts. And for those that don't know about the history with Trent Horn, this is a mirror situation of the history with Michael Lofton and Eric Ibarra. And you might think, why is Jay so mean? Why does he just, out of nowhere, he just suddenly becomes mean to these poor, innocent, victim Roman Catholics? No. You see, this is many years of interacting and dealing with these people. And you'll notice that in many of these cases, the original relationships started out friendly. Everybody had podcasts together. Everybody had common discourse. People made joke videos. Laura Horn made a video making fun of the realm of Catholic apologetics and Protestant and Orthodox apologetics, and those videos were entertaining. They were, it was a lighthearted era. Everybody was sort of, quote, getting along. However, what developed was more and more bad behavior that many of those Roman Catholics wouldn't exemplify publicly, but would exemplify behind the scenes. And if you doubt that, note that, for example, in the case of Michael Lofton, almost everyone that he originally interacted with and worked with eventually had that bridge burned and came to the same conclusion, that he's impossible to work with, he's exceedingly fragile, he can't take any jokes or ribbing, and the lightest, softest things set him off. Now, on top of that, in the case of Lofton, as an example, if you recall, I was going to be on Gospel Simplicity maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Lofton and Ibarra tried all they could to get me canceled from going on that show and other shows. Michael Lofton emailed and called, for example, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias's diocese, trying to get him defrocked, trying to complain because he said the R word. Yes, you heard me right, because a deacon used the word retard one time in a Discord message. This was clipped as an attempt to cancel FDA. To me, these tactics and techniques are so ridiculous, so leftist, and so just bad faith that the public humility and piety signaling is the most nauseating of all of it. To have the public face of being a perpetual victim, as this, like the meme says, as you're stabbing people in the back and acting so fake, eventually wears on all the people that you're around. And when you run everyone else off, it's a good sign that maybe it's not everybody else that's the problem. In the case of the Roman Catholic domain nowadays, a lot of those figures have sort of drifted away. They sort of waned in interest. Their channels are not that popular. And now this has all sort of fallen to Trent Horn. Trent now has the mantle, you could say, I guess, of what's left of Roman Catholic apologetics. There's not a whole lot there. We have lunatics like Sam Shamoon, obvious mental problems, absolutely unstable, and much like all the other characters, literally has run off every single person who's been kind and tried to work with him. There's not a single person. Even his last leather daddy friend, William Albrecht, has been run off due to whatever their recent faking gay scandals were. Now, the reason I'm bringing up character and behavior is because we don't usually talk about that. This isn't a drama channel. That's not what we focus on. But I've noticed the pattern that when the theological and position arguments start to fail, the inevitable shift turns to the bad behavior and piety signaling. Could there be times when people deserve to be called out for bad behavior? Sure. For example, Voice of Reason, one of their rising star apologists. Everybody sort of had inclinations and called out Voice of Reason as very sus. Something was going on. And lo and behold, this chief piety signaler person himself, this vast castle of piety defenses. I mean, he was one of the most nauseating piety signalers. Well, it turns out he's engaged in absolutely horrendous private activities, and that all comes out. And does he cease being a, quote, minister? No, now he does everything on Patreon on the back end of things. And lo and behold, we are still the bad people. The Orthodox are still the nasty, disgusting people, according to him and his grifter buddy, Roots of Orthodoxy. Now, in the case of Trent Horn, again, the mantle seems to have fallen to him to be the present voice of Catholic apologetics. But Trent Horn himself is no stranger to this same shifty, sus attitude. And everybody falls for the public pretense of niceness and piety and all of this. And then once again, it always begins in a very friendly, charitable way. But as things don't go their way, they then turn to more and more nefarious backdoor activities. And I'll give you some examples. So, in the case of Trent Horn, when I've asked for this debate, Trent has always explicitly said, I will not debate this topic. I can't debate you. It's not my topic. Now, every other Roman Catholic apologist that I've gone down the line, including Roman Catholic academics and historians that I've messaged and reached out to, none of them will debate this topic. So it's interesting to me that they will not debate this topic. And now that we've gotten to an actual public, biggest news story of our lifetime release of the Epstein files that does explicitly in multiple instances link Epstein to a direct relationship with John Paul II, to a direct relationship with Pope Francis, to scheduling meetings, etc., even to sharing weird architectural fetishes that they apparently had. All of that must now, and including, by the way, Jeffrey Epstein's intimate knowledge of the inner workings of the Vatican Bank, again suggesting this close relationship. Again, I'm not claiming that there's explicit evidence that John Paul II did something in that abuse case scenario, although he has been called out for many, many years by many, many, many Roman Catholics for covering up the abuse crises. What you'll notice is that the Roman Catholic world isn't concerned with, is that true? They're concerned with covering it up. There's a pattern here, and Cleve very perceptively noticed this, that, for example, when he in his weekly shows has called out the insane LGBT, trans, skittles, all that stuff in the Roman Catholic domain going on everywhere. You have priests doing gay marriages, you have actual ones, you have blessing the couples, you have everything that you could think of, including blasphemous artwork, Sacred Heart that's a pig heart. I mean, just all this insane blasphemous stuff. And when Cleve brings it up, do you have Roman Catholics wanting to cleanse that church and expose that? No, they immediately go into cover up mode. So we're going to be looking to see, is Trent Horn concerned with the truth of the Vatican Bank and its scandals, the truth of the role of the papacy in geopolitics? And is there perhaps smoke where there's fire? Is there fire where there's smoke, I should say? Rather, it seems that he immediately has gone into lawyering mode, papal lawyers. We talked about this years ago with Eric Ibarra. It seemed as if Ibarra was more and more and more becoming a legate or a legal defense character for the papacy versus a seeker of what's true. Now, notice I'm not arguing that the Orthodox Church doesn't have geopolitical corruption. Of course it does. Who ever thought that there wasn't a persecutory relationship, for example, between the Soviet state and the Orthodox Church in Russia? Everybody knows this. Roman Catholics themselves should be aware of the fact that their own theologians like Yves Congar admit that the Gregorian reforms was a period when there was a tremendous amount of Germanic state influence on the papacy. And who would be the Pope? So much for Caesaropapism, because that's papalo-Caesarism. Same position. But when we come to Trent Horn, because there is a nicer face on the front of this, there's this tendency, I think, to assume that anyone who critiques or comes after Trent Horn must be evil and must be nefarious. And I'm going to show you a consistent pattern of absolute inability to admit even the slightest error. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, if you look up the traits of narcissism, and I'm not trying to do one of those low-tier YouTube psychoanalysis things, I'm just giving my own personal opinion. I've met a lot of people over the years who literally cannot admit that they even made the slightest error at all on anything. That tends to be a characteristic of a narcissistic type of person. In the case of a family member, for example, I have a family member who I think has this, and they've almost never admitted in their life that they've ever done anything wrong, even the slightest thing, which is just a bizarre, it's almost like, it's like it's removing your humanity, because we all know that surely at some point in your life you did something dumb, got something wrong, and surely you needed at some point in your life to apologize. But to people that have a very fragile narcissistic type of attitude, they are absolutely incapable of ever admitting that they made a mistake. And I don't just mean making a video pretending to say, I got this wrong and I want to admit, because you can do a lot of those types of things for public consumption. I'm talking about actual deep, heartfelt, man, I really screwed up. Man, I've got a problem here. I made a mistake. And I think anybody in the Orthodox Church knows that as you begin to try to fight the passions, as we talked about with Father Turbo today on that podcast, you are very quickly going to see not just how many mistakes you've made, but how difficult it really is to defeat the passions. It really takes the grace of God to defeat the passions. And it's a lifelong struggle. But when you have people who consistently double, triple, and quadruple down on things that eventually even become common public knowledge, it's very odd. It's very bizarre. And I think that speaks to the root of what the problem is here that most people are missing. People jump into the debates, jump into the comments. I saw dozens of comments that were, they look to be bots, because it's like Roman Catholic profiles with no followers, hardly any tweets, and they suddenly pop up to comment on all the Trent stuff out of nowhere. Like, where is this? Who are the what? Who, by the way, has a profile that only comments on like a Trent Horn thing and nothing else? It's just really weird, and no followers. It's bizarre. I get proof that it's botted, but I would not be surprised, because Catholic Answers is, of course, part of this organizational structure of the Roman Catholic Church that at all costs must triple down, quadruple down to defend the hierarchy at all costs, no matter what. And this is really the problem of this system. When you have systemic level corruption from the top down in that type of autocratic system, it becomes very difficult for the members within that system to go after the head of it, especially if the fish is rotting from the head down, because it then almost everybody intuitively knows that if we give up this papal thing, then the whole thing falls. It's a house of cards, especially if you read Vatican I. And in the last several years, most Roman Catholics that have converted to Orthodoxy that I've talked to or we've interacted with, almost all of them have said to me, Jay, when I actually went and read Vatican I is when I understood the arguments and the position. Then I understood why it's a system level defeater. That's why we're not arguing that the Russian Orthodox Church has no corruption. The Russian Orthodox Church, the Romanian Orthodox Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church. We are not arguing that. Nobody would be so silly as to argue that our church has no corruption, yours has moral corruption. Again, the argument is that to show that the papacy has defected or contradicted at a dogmatic level on faith or morals, that is a system level defeater. And you can't apply that argument, copy and paste, to the Orthodox system because it doesn't have that position. It does not argue that the EP or any of the individual bishoprics are infallible or that they can't defect. In fact, many of them have. The EP has, in many cases in church history, defected and become heterodox. So from our system, we don't have a problem saying Rome is heterodox, and then also other sees can be heterodox, including the EP. Roman Catholics think that the Orthodox are a sort of want-to-be papacy system, and so their ecumenical patriarch is a sort of little pope, or there's 5 little popes. Now, they don't even understand that their own system in the past has already recognized the pentarchy as a normative structure of the church. I'm going to talk about why I blocked Trent Horn in a moment. It has nothing to do with the recent, well, it does have to do with the recent discussions, but people are saying, how are you going to have a debate when you blocked him? Trent has already declined debate. Do you not understand this? I block people all the time because I lose respect for people when they go to the piety signaling and they won't debate. And at that point, I don't want to interact with you anymore. You have lost respect in my eyes. I think that you are a coward. Because if you really believe this system, if you really knew your doctrine and your dogmas, it would be easy for you to come on here and make the case. You could request, Jay, I want time to talk about my position. Give me 2-5 minutes to state my position. I would give you that. We've done that for many people who've called in over the last 8, almost 10 years of call-ins. That's easy to do. No, you're just going to mute people. You're going to mute people. I don't even hit the mute button. I might boot people, but I don't mute people. There's no need to mute people. Because in almost all of these cases, except for the rare chance occurrence when we get a knowledgeable Roman Catholic, which is pretty rare, most of you guys end up hanging your own selves when I ask you a series of questions. I don't have to mute you when after about 5 minutes of questioning, I can easily pull out of you the contradictions because I know this system so well. I lived it intimately for almost a decade. None of the people who come on, by the way, have ever even investigated the information that I've sent to them. Now, I still like many of the Roman Catholics that I'm friends with, like Tim. Joe Enders is a good guy. Anthony from Avoiding Babylon. Those are good guys. But all of these people, I have sent reading lists, books, suggestions to for all of these years. And none of them have even scratched the surface of the material. What does that tell me? That tells me that they're not actually that interested in the position that we're putting forward. Now, the way I approach debates, and the reason that I don't lose debates, is that I always want to know the material as good as my opponent or better. That was a dictum that Dr. Bahnsen always recommended. If you want to win a debate, if you want to know how to always win, know the opponent's position to his satisfaction, and you'll never lose. Now, obviously, you have to know your position too, but it's a great principle for debate. And we all know that when I debated Trent Horn, whom I've already debated, for those of you that are saying, you're scared to debate Trent, I've already debated Trent. And all of the polls, even Roman Catholics, for the majority, admitted that Trent did terrible in that debate. In fact, a Roman Catholic today was saying, hey, look, I'm not happy with this recent kerfluffle, but you did beat him in a debate. Okay, well, that's fine, but let's talk about the topics and the issues, because ever since that debate, Trent has had a bit of a dilemma with me. He's had an issue with me. And since that debate, I've said for months, years, well, it's been years, 4 or 5 years since we had the debate. I said, Trent, let's do a debate on the geopolitics of the papacy, because I actually believe that's a kill shot. Here's why. He won't do it. He will not do it. So why would the Catholic apologist, who's the top apologist now, why would he not debate the argument that is, I think, the kill shot argument. Why would he not? Well, to be fair to Trent, he does admit that it's not an area that he's very knowledgeable in. Well, if this is becoming a consistent argument that people opposed to are making, maybe it's time to become familiar with it. Now, years ago, I sent Trent 4 books I said he should read. I said, you should read the Gladio text. You should read by Paul Williams. You should read the John Courtney Murray text. You should read, I forget what else. It was a couple other geopolitical texts related to the same material. No interest at all. So again, if people are not interested in engaging the line of argument that we're making, and if Trent Horn always falls back on just wanting to debate the papacy, which by the way itself is ambiguous, right? Remember in the debate with Tim Gordon, do you Orthodox deny the papacy, or did Jesus set up the papacy? Well, that's a equivocation, because what the papacy means in the post-Vatican I system is not the same thing as papacy in the Orthodox system. Of course, Orthodox and Catholics both believe that Jesus set up a, quote, papacy, aka Bishop of Rome. But what the extent of his powers, the natures of that power are, is where we disagree. So a lot of this debate, a lot of these things trade on ambiguities. And to go back to the Trent Horn debate, if you recall, Trent wasn't familiar with basic epistemic issues and debates. So when I brought up the criteria question, self-evidence and circularity, Trent was lost. In fact, he appealed to Descartes' cogito as if that was actually a good argument. It's a terrible argument. And I called all of that out. And you'll notice, where did that natural theology debate lead? Exactly where I wanted it to go, which was in the direction of showing that the Roman Catholic position logically leads you to say that the Old Testament doesn't teach the triad. It teaches a Unitarian deity. And where did Trent go? Exactly there. He admitted the very point that I wanted to come out of that debate. And that caused a lot of a reaction against Trent's position. Trent admitting that the Old Testament doesn't teach a triad was a huge defeat, because that shows that the natural theology position logically leads to some kind of perennialism and or syncretism. Well, lo and behold, what does Vatican II teach? Nostra Aetate teaches that very thing. And Pope Francis and Pope Leo have reiterated that Nostra Aetate absolutely means it in that way, that we all worship the same God, not just the quote monotheists, but also Hindus. Exactly as I argued on Timcast to Tim Gordon and to Tim Pool. So Francis reaffirms my reading of these texts. Leo reaffirms my reading of these texts. But the Roman Catholic apologists all know better than their popes, which is amazing. The actions of the papacy demonstrate and signify how they understand this by praying in mosques towards Mecca, by participating in Hindu religious festivals, by participating in the Assisi festivals back in the 1980s, where all the religions come together at Assisi to pray to whatever generic god they're praying to. Lo and behold, that's the basis for the document, the Declaration on Human Fraternity and Religious Freedom, according to the joint statement between Francis and the Grand Imam. That became the basis for the Abu Dhabi Faith Center. Now, who's going to tell me that if the Abu Dhabi Faith Center, which is the generic theism of natural theology of the quote monotheistic religions, if that's what they build on the basis of Francis's document and philosophy from Vatican II, how are you going to tell me that that's not what Vatican II means? It becomes utterly absurd to anybody with any discernment. But the problem with Roman Catholic apologetics, and I know because I was one, I was in this world for many, many years, is that you are stuck coming up with making squares fit into round holes. It does it. You force it in, you push it in to make it work, and you come up with whatever you think might make it work. Remember when I first brought up to Trent a long time ago, the death penalty. I said, Trent, how could the death penalty at the time of Trent and the Council of Trent talk about it being something part of natural justice? And then by the time of the New Catechism, John Paul II and Pope Francis, it is now, quote, contrary to the gospel. How can we have, at the time of Pius V and Trent, the statement that homosexuality is liable to the death penalty to be handed over to the state, and now all the way up to today, we have the blessing of and the allowance of gay priests in the Italian diocese. Now, I understand they're expected to, quote, be chaste, but as Father James Martin said, who is now supported by Pope Leo openly, the difference here is that we're not going to say that identifying as a homosexual bars you from the priesthood. It used to, and now it will not. So that is a specific change in the Italian diocese, and Leo agreed with that change. These are obvious, clear changes in Catholic morals. Do you remember what Trent said in his video as to how to make that work? He actually said there's a lot of different things that you could do to make this work. Wait a minute. I thought Catholic theology worked. Why do we need to construct things to make it work? Why are there different interpretations? As he said, I think he said something like there's 3 different ways you can interpret this. So wait a minute. The purpose of the magisterium is to make clear Catholic doctrine so that we have clear answers. This is the pop Catholic apologist selling point that they always give you guys. And yet, when it comes to a very basic moral issue, should there be the death penalty? Should we have that? Trent says there's 3 ways to interpret the Pope's statement on the death penalty. Wait a minute. So now we need your 3 interpretations of a magisterial supposed teaching on morals. The epistemic issue is so crucial and so devastating that once you get the epistemic issue, it's pretty much over, because you realize that the magisterial teachings are really whatever any individual Roman Catholic wants to be the magisterial teachings. Let's give an example, because when Trent was asked, and by the way, people said, you're not being fair because this is a clipped comment. This is all he offered in the video. Go watch the full video. When asked a specific epistemic question, which he still does not get, Trent, what tells us the criteria for when something is infallible and binding? In your system, give me the criteria. I don't want the things that you think are binding. What's the criteria for when we know that it is infallible and binding magisterium? And let's hear Trent's answer once again.
Doctrine is understood as defined infallibly unless this is manifestly evident.
That's literally what he said. That's all he said, by the way. You clipped it. You clipped it. Yeah, it's clipped because that's all he said. He said a lot more words, but there was no other argumentation as to what that even means, because he goes to canon law. Now, as far as I'm aware, most Roman Catholics do not believe canon law is infallible. For one, it's time-bound to a degree. It's changeable. It's updated. And so you could say it's binding, morally binding, but not necessarily eternally time-bound, eternally binding and infallible. So there's some flexibility there with the rulings, you could say, that the papacy gives through canon law. But it may be still flexible. But so you went to a thing that's now fallible, as far as I can tell, in your system. And again, Roman Catholics even debate what that even means to say that it's, who knows what the actual status is. This is always debated. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's fallible. You're going to a thing that's fallible to tell me a generic principle, manifestly evident, for identifying amongst stacks of thousands of documents the things that are infallible. Who does not see how absurd this is? I mean, am I in a loony bin and everybody else is loony? Am I actually the Brad Pitt character in 12 Monkeys and I'm like eating bugs and like am I just hallucinating reality that nobody else can see, that this is absolutely ridiculous? Just so fundamentally ridiculous at a basic level. You don't need a PhD, a THD in epistemology and philosophy and theology to get this basic question. And you guys will recall every Roman Catholic so-called apologist that I brought this up to absolutely has a meltdown when I bring it up. When I brought it up to, what's that guy's name? Fields guy, what's it? Pine Sap. Pine Sap has a meltdown and starts, you're a little man. You're a pathetic little man. Bro, all I asked you was, what's the criteria? Pathetic little man. You're a pathetic little man. This is all they have, is a spewing forth of insults. Now, when we say, well, Dyer, you're the worst, this isn't actually even the case when we talk about this domain
something
of jokes and insults, right? And remember, when they're on the ropes, when they're flailing, they immediately shift away from the doctrine and theology arguments and the philosophy arguments to the bad behavior of all the ortho bros. This is what they do. They've been doing this move all the way back to 2016, 17, 18. Do you remember? I used to say, Lofton, it's not going to work to keep people in your church to just say and whine about ortho bros, to whine about the fat joke I made about Ibarra 8 years ago. Like, how do you think that's going to keep people in your church? The only people that keeps in your church are the most low information, lowbrow people who don't care about what's true. And maybe that's what they're after. Maybe they just care about the numbers. That's all that matters is the big numbers, because many of them actually think that proves their church. They actually think that numbers proves the truth, literally. And they think that winning battles proves the truth. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. They don't even realize their own greatest saint of the patristic era, St. Augustine, wrote an entire apologetics, City of God, arguing that you can't prove or disprove the true faith on the basis of political success and battles, you idiot. Because Rome said that Christianity caused the Roman Empire to fall. So Augustine wrote City of God saying this is a stupid argument. The whole book is about that. It's an apologetic against that argument. Most of the online Roman Catholic idiots literally repeat the pagan argument. Oh, bro, you lost. You lost. You fell, dog. We owned you, dude. It fell when it was uniate, you idiot. So that's an argument against you. Your own argument that when you lose a battle disproves your church means that Roman Catholicism is false because Byzantium fell when it was Roman Catholic, you idiots. Now, on that geopolitical point, the reason this matters is that all of these things in our worldview are connected. It's true that you don't have to have all of your geopolitics straight to be saved or to be whatever. That's not the point. The point is that when you are a public figure and when you push various ideologies and ideas, and even if you don't explicitly know morals such as stabbies and masking up, you are taking a stance on a very controversial issue. And I suspect, I can't prove it, but I've asked Trent, I said, why did you delete all of your past social media stuff? All of his tweets up until recently were all deleted. And he put up this thing saying, oh, I'm pious, and so I'm leaving social media, which he didn't actually leave because he's out here tweeting all the time. So that was all performative. But I suspect that being pro-life, he says, means that you want it to be illegal to directly kill innocent human beings. So he's arguing, I firmly support stabbies and masking up. Thus, Trent was trying to morally one-up people who would doubt what was not actually a stabby. It was a experimental genetic stabby. He apparently didn't know that and probably still doesn't know this, because even today, when this has been brought up, he can't admit that he cannot admit any error even on this. Now, why do I bring this up? Because there's a lack of discernment at a global level about spiritual realities that affect the temporal sphere. If he were to admit that he was wrong about coof, stabbies, and lockdowns, and masks, and social distancing, this would also implicate his papacy once again in failing to see a very basic moral principle. And of course, the papacy openly promoted the stabbies and the lockdowns, and UNESCO, and Davos. Now, when all that was brought up, what was Trent and Jimmy Akin's reaction? The conspirators with their tinfoil hats believe that there's a global elite. In fact, the first childish joke that Trent Horn made about me, now remember, Trent Horn is so pious, he's above making childish jokes. The first thing he ever said about me was that I'm a Jack Chick comic come to life. I'm a low-tier fundamentalist, idiot conspiracy theorist. That was his portrayal of me. Jack Chick come to life, low-tier, fundamentalist level tinfoil hatter. This was what he was arguing about me before our natural theology debate. After doing the debate, I think he regretted that arrogance that he had. Now, did he ever, even a little bit perhaps, move the needle and admit I was wrong? Of course not. Because Trent fundamentally can never admit that he's made a mistake. And isn't that funny? Because that's the system of the papacy. The papacy is a massive, super fragile system. And like his pope, to ever admit any defection in teaching and theology, to admit error truly, sincerely from the heart, would be for them the undermining of their so-called papal perfect system. They are like the thing that they spiritually commune with. And so the reason that, for example, we make a big deal about who we commune with, and they don't, is precisely because there's a spiritual dimension to this where you are linking yourself to these people and participating in their spirit. And so if you are communing with Francis and Leo, even if you're critical, you're still communing with that spirit. You are taking on this delusion and thus forcing yourself by kind of spiritual contract to defend at all costs and cover up at all costs significant degeneracy and wickedness in that system. And I am not just saying that it's a question of, oh, you say they're corrupt bishops. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying way beyond that. International crime syndicate level evil. Epstein level stuff. That's what I'm talking about. That's way beyond, was the bishop stealing money? Was the bishop secretly gay? Did he touch butts? It's more than that. It's inverted satanic elements that even some of their own tradcats have called out over the last 50 years. Ritual abuse. The first book that I read on this, which Trent thinks is so funny, was from a Roman Catholic journalist in 2004. When all of this started breaking in the news, especially on the internet. And he wrote this book, Lucifer's Lodge, SRA in the Catholic Church, William Kennedy. All this book is a collation of news articles and journals and papers. That's it. Now, there's some areas where he speculates on how did this come into the church in America, etc. But the overall thrust of that book is a Catholic journalist writing about problems within Rome. And that came out when I was a tradcat. So when I was a tradcat reading that shook me. Not because I thought, well, I'm going to immediately leave Catholicism, but I thought, well, at least this guy's calling this out. We got to deal with these problems. And in the 2000s, when I was a Roman Catholic, a tradcat, I became a Roman Catholic in 2003. I noticed the tendency was constantly amongst priests, bishops, cardinals, and even the Pope to constantly cover these things up, to move people like Cardinal Bernard Law that were massively involved in this around to cover it up, to protect, move the priests around. Does that exemplify the attitude of, for example, St. Paul when he writes to the church at Corinth? Does he say, cover it up? Or does he say, get them out? What's the proper attitude? Everybody should know what the proper attitude is. So the question then arises, well, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they purge the institution? Well, our good buddy, or John Paul's good buddy, Jeff Stein McEffrey, has a indicator as to why that is, and that is in the Vatican Bank email. We're going to see why this matters and why they don't want to talk about it. This is Epstein's email to Larry Summers, the Clinton-era Viper banker. Hey, Jamie. She may not be in there. The most important change in the Vatican may not be Pope Benedict's sudden retirement, but the change in leadership at the Vatican Bank. Because the Vatican Bank's status as a sovereign country, it is exempt from transparency rules, not only of Italy, but also of the EU. This status allows it to be an elite client its elite clients to evade scrutiny for money transfers. Epstein is explaining to a Clinton-era high-level banker, Larry Summers, and Viper, who helped loot Russia, the inner workings of the Vatican Bank. How does Jeff Stein McGeffrey know the inner workings of the Vatican Bank? Oh, because he was friends with John Paul II, as we said. The status allows its clients to evade scrutiny. It's a money laundering operation. The Vatican Bank's president, Ettore Tedeschi, was fired after Italian authorities investigated his bribery schemes in which he allegedly was involved. He had 47 dossiers, etc. And then this was the background to the real reason Benedict XVI stepped up, according to Epstein. Now, you could disagree with the theory of Epstein here. It doesn't matter. But what it shows is a knowledge of the inner workings of the Vatican Bank, just like we talked about in the Gladio lectures and the Gladio books. So this is Epstein basically saying, this is the Gladio, so this is how it works. It's an organized crime black market bank, and that's the whole story of Banco d'Ambrosio, Roberto Calvi, and the collapse and stealing of the Italian people's pensions. This was huge news back in the 70s. It came out in the early 90s. They didn't know it was Gladio yet, but that's what this was. And they had compromised a large portion of the Italian cardinals and members of parliament, et cetera, whatever their government system is in Italy. They were basically compromised. And this is the entire book by Catholic FBI consultant John Williams. Again, not a conspiracy theorist. Okay. So these things indicate and point to what I'm talking about, what I've been talking about. And they don't want to talk about that. Their immediate mode of operation is to downplay, cover it up, downplay. And they've always done this. The book is Operation Gladio by Paul Williams. And if you don't want to get the book, the entire book is on YouTube on audio. Paul Williams, Operation Gladio. Now, that's just one text. We've actually lectured through many, many texts on Gladio. And you might want to know as well that these relationships, this history, isn't even controversial. You can find this in mainline history that, for example, the Mossad established a very close relationship with John Paul II. That's why John Paul II had so many overtures and actions towards promoting rabbinic Judaism, promoting Nostra Aetate, all of those things that are so controversial. John Paul II was the champion of that. He did more for that than anyone else in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. So all the beige trad cats that want to make this some sort of beige trad, anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist thing, that's not your papacy. Your papacy is a Zionist thing, explicitly. I'm not talking about political Zionism. I'm talking about the theology of it. Yeah, I'm sure you could say, well, Francis and Leo, they've criticized the operations in Gaza. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about were they ever critical. I'm not talking about did they oppose Desert Storm. I'm talking about the theological admissions to not proselytize. And you notice they lie when they say proselytism doesn't mean making converts. It means forcing them to become. That's not true. Total bullcrap. The word has never meant forcing people to become converts. They just make up stuff. They just lie like crazy. Just like them saying that you blocked Trent Horn so that he couldn't debate you. No. He's already said 3 times he won't debate. What are you talking about? Here's his email, his Twitter post saying, I will not debate. Now, you can make all this fuss and smoke and mirrors all you want, guys. But again, why will none of your Roman Catholics debate the geopolitical kill shot argument that I make? Why won't they do it? If it's such a weak argument, it should be very easy for any competent Catholic apologist or scholar or historian to come on and simply debunk this. Do you know what they all say in response to that? You're too mean. I'm too mean, really. Now, what are the things that characterize the too mean thing? Well, let's look at that. Does Trent Horn engage in childish argumentation? Well, we saw yesterday that he was gloating about a ratio. Haha, I ratioed Jay Dyer. I ratioed him. Now, there's nothing more immature and 4chan level speak than talking about a ratio. And by the way, the other post that I put up ratioed him. So what? Now, the first thing that Trent Horn said about Andrew Wilson in his video was that Andrew Wilson can't open a pickle jar. He's not a man, like implying Andrew isn't even himself manly because there was this pickle jar. Now, I know people don't know this, but when you go on the Whatever podcast, that room is freaking 100 degrees. It is hot as hell in there. Super hot. And so, yes, you are sweaty. You sweat the whole time you're in there. It's in California. And so the fact that Andrew couldn't twist the pickle jar because it was hot as hell and he was sweating in there is the most ridiculous thing to go to prove that Andrew isn't manly or whatever. Total bullcrap. That's all they have. But isn't that immature, Trent? I'm confused because we're not supposed to engage in making fun of people. But it's okay for the Catholics to do it. They have a free license to do it. They do it all the time. Michael Lofton used to make fun of me. Michael Lofton would put up ridiculous thumbnails of me. Who cares? Guys don't really care about that level of stuff unless you're very fragile, very sensitive, and you can't deal with banter. The reason Tim Gordon and I are still friends and we can banter and joke around is that he's a normal guy. These weirdos are not normal dudes. There's something off with them that makes them sensitive and soy to where the slightest joke, the slightest reference turns them into women. They become effeminate, catty women. Now let's listen to Trent's comments here. And remember, this comes on the heels of the last video a few weeks ago, blaming all the ortho bros because debate is now no longer worth it. No, it's evil now. Debate is bad because Jay Dyer, Andrew Wilson, they've ruined debate. Well, first of all, blood sports debate does not come out of the theology domain. This was something that Andy Worski started with JF to have drama streams and to have these weird sort of hash outs. It also included at times people doing theological debates and cultural debates. But originally, it came out of the gaming and Worski sphere. I was right there at the thick of that. It went through a phase of being associated with Ralph What's-His-Face, and then it became the thing that's associated with Andrew. And ironically, Andrew upped the game and the status of the debate by actually putting on way more formal debates on the Crucible than anything like what Andy Worski put out. Those debates were absolute chaos. Just degenerate, everybody cussing everybody out, screaming. It was just pure drama. The Andrew era has produced mostly formal structured debates. I'm going to be debating Monday against Gnostic Informant. It's a formal debate. We're going to be debating his, I know it's crazy. I thought he was a Gnostic with a name like Gnostic Informant, but apparently he's a pantheist, monist or something. So again, formal debates are the tendency there. I've never seen a problem with going into the sphere of whatever and having those other types of debates because I came out of that domain. It doesn't bother me to have a heated exchange. But keep in mind that Trent Horn only thinks of debates in a very formal, structured way. And that's fine. Like, that still exists. Nobody says you can't do that. But nobody ruined debate because there was always the low-tier blood sport yelling types of debates. That's always existed. And to blame that on me and other people is just kind of ridiculous that we all ruin debates. Debates are all about image and debates are all about the way it looks. Well, Trent, if that's the case, then why are you focusing on the optics of behavior in people who debate and not focusing on the arguments? So you're doing the very thing that you say is the problem in modern debate. It's become about optics and gotchas and behavior and not about the argumentation. That's what you've been doing in your last several videos. It's all about the optics and who said a mean joke. And it's just so gay, dude. Trent, this is so gay, dude. It's just so weak and freaking gay, dude. And that's what is so annoying to so many people. We're actually going to see that the root of the problem here is multiple, but it's a spiritual problem and it's a masculinity problem. And according to Trent, the ortho bros are toxically masculine. You can't make this up because Trent, I'm not kidding, is a male feminist. In the debate with Tim Gordon, he defends earlier feminism. Voting for women is necessary and essential, according to Trent Horn. Now, being a conspiracy theorist, I don't put a whole lot of stock in voting, but I certainly don't take this ridiculous normie position that we can actually benefit from women voting when women vote for the worst stuff in massive numbers. It's a preposterous position. And I hope Trent really does debate Andrew on that topic. I hope it comes about. But you have to keep in mind, other Roman Catholics who aren't even SSPX Sedevacantist trads, other Roman Catholics take huge issue with Trent over these issues. So this isn't just a ortho bro versus reasonable Trent position. Large numbers of Roman Catholics think that Trent is ridiculous on this position. This is why he has this debate with Tim Gordon on male feminism. And keep in mind, too, he debated Pearl on the same topic of defending male versions, early versions of, as a male feminist, defending the early waves of feminism. All the waves of feminism are bad because all the waves of feminism are a form of gender dysphoria. And Tim is 100% correct on that. Tim has consistently showed in older papal teaching that the popes held Tim's position. So the fact that modern Roman Catholic apologetics and lectures and talks support this idea of equal submission is preposterous. And the reason people call that out in Trent's personal life is that it shows the problem. You're just being mean. You're just attacking him. Dude, you know how many Roman Catholics have come after me and my wife for 10 years and said the worst imaginable stuff? It happens all the time. I'm not saying that's good, but I'm saying you're going to have people looking at your private life, your personal life, and they're going to see, does this match up to what you're publicly saying? You're publicly moralizing all the time. That's the thing that is so disgusting from these people. It's not that they take a moral position. It's not that they defend their positions. It's that they moralize and they constantly want to one-up you spiritually and morally, and it's nauseating because dudes know that it's just weak. It's weak sauce to constantly whine about a man saying something in a debate that hurt your feelings, to constantly say he shouldn't make jokes about fake Bishop Tilda Swinton. That's mean. Are you serious? You would rather tone police for a rabid anti-white Marxist fake bishop. He's a con man. You would rather tone police for that guy. Well, that guy deserves to be trolled. That guy deserves to be laughed at. He's a ridiculous person. And in the debate on Piers Morgan, it showed he was a ridiculous person. He's a complete idiot. But I'm actually kind of amazed that the only thing Trent found was me calling Tilda Swan, whatever. I don't even know what his name is anymore. I just think of him as Tilda Swinton, which I thought was a funny joke. And I will always troll and make ridiculous jokes like that. But imagine harping on that as a moral one-up. That is so gay, dude. It's just freaking gay. At least find something better. Like me calling a bar a fat. That's a more morally appropriate thing than me going after some fake con man activist that your own church agrees isn't a bishop. That means he's a fraud, a con man. But I'm bad because I made fun of him and called him Tilda Swinton, which everybody agrees was a funny joke. It's just so weak, dude. Now, I have plenty of criticisms of Pearl, but I'm going to mention just this little clip because people were not attacking Trent Horn over his wife. Now, maybe Groypers were. I didn't follow that stuff, and I didn't even talk about any of this. But I'm bringing it up because it shows the discrepancy between the things that he says male feminism will do and his own life. When his own wife disrespects him, And by the way, she retires from social media after this event. Trent has a video where he tries to explain this away and say, no, she didn't cheat. Nobody says she cheated. The point was that she formed a bond with a man that was not you, and she talked about it on a podcast, which is somewhat humiliating. And they played the victim after all of this, and that deflected from a lot of these criticisms. He's not addressing the main point that people are making. Now, maybe some of these groypers were going too crazy and saying awful stuff. Yeah, but the main point is, Trent, you're moralizing, hyper-moralizing constantly, and you're doing that more and more and more recently. And that's really nauseating when people don't see that in your own life. This is exactly what happened to Voice of Reason. Hyper-moralizing, piety signaling nonstop. And of all people, I have many disagreements with Pearl. She can, even as an outsider to the religion, recognize that the people that constantly morally piety signal all these e-girls, they do the exact same. The e-girls, Sarah Stock, constantly moralizing about how moral she was because she was getting married. She beat everybody else. She won the contest. All the thoughts lost. And it was total hypocrisy. That's the point here, is that when you base your channel and your apologetic on the moralizing, what happened with Voice of Reason? He starts out debating debating Protestants and Orthodox on actual theological issues. Then he shifts into all about that piety signaling, baby. When you see that shift, there's usually something else going on, and it's usually a matter of time before they get exposed. So why am I saying this? You're being mean to Trent. No, I'm not being mean, because the root of the problem here is that Trent is an effeminate soy man. That's the problem. Trent cannot admit, because he's so fragile, he's so psychologically weak, to admit any theological error, any geopolitical error, any error on history or papacy in his mind would be to crack this facade. And he's wrong about all of it. He's been wrong since we had the debate on natural theology. He's wrong about the Old Testament. He's quadrupled down on Muslims, Christians, and Jews worshiping the same God. And he doesn't care about the various fallacious critiques that we made, explaining how that's not possible. He doesn't even care about the quantifier shift fallacy. He just repeats the papal system, as if that were an argument, to just repeat the papal doctrine. Like, people that don't believe in the papacy are not going to just buy you repeating the papal theology and the papal arguments and assertions over and over and over. We need an actual argument as to why it's the case, not just the papal positions. So why is this a root problem in the household?
Saying that men need to get married, the sleeping ground is men, it's not women doing it. And I just knew, sometimes my super simp radar goes off, right? I'm like, this guy, his wife is running the relationship because of how he thinks and his super simp tendencies.
This is accurate. And I'm saying this because Trent himself says, my wife chooses my friends for me. You want me to play you the video? I might have unshared it. I can't remember if I shared it or not. And this is not just, again, I'm sure a lot of people dislike Pearl. The only reason I'm playing this one is because she has the clip of the 3-hour Matt Fradd podcast, and I don't know where in that 3-hour podcast this is. And I'm certainly not going to watch a whole 3-hour podcast talking about all this nonsense. So we're going to listen just to this brief section where she discusses this, and then we're going to listen to what Dr. Jordan Peterson, who is absolutely spot on about male feminists. This is the psychology of a male feminist.
Now, I think this was the guy who hosted it, Pints with Aquinas. And again, this is the challenge you get with the religious men. It's like what they have a tendency to do is they virtue signal morality. So they say, I am so moral. But how moral can you be as a man if you are afraid of your wife? Yeah, like if you fear your wife, you're officially a woman now. You have the same morals as a woman because you're going to defer to our morals. And we don't have morality. We don't have. Okay, so here we go.
Hey, so I got super close to a male coworker.
Make sure this isn't on 2X. Okay.
Hey, so I got super close to a male coworker. Yeah. And I shared this testimony, and we used to do like a marriage encounter weekend, and I shared this testimony, and I got too close to him. And you start, I wouldn't say developing feelings, and Trent knows all this stuff, but I think that's how affairs happen. They happen very slowly. It's not like you just have an affair with someone. You get to know them. You're attracted to their temperament. They see the best side of you. And like Trent was very uncomfortable with it. And I was like, well, we're just friends, but he's not a jealous person at all. So he was like, I'm just asking that you don't do anything that you wouldn't be uncomfortable with me doing with a woman. Like you have that same standard. Like if I was like talking to a coworker often and joking around with that person and they were, like getting.
So she's talking publicly about how she wanted to smash another dude. And
now, again, the reason I'm playing this is because it shows the discrepancy between Trent's picturing of how feminism and male feminism is supposed to work and why it actually is a good thing and why it's the Christian way to go. And yet in the real dynamics, what's going on, to everybody who has any sense can see, that's not how that works. Women do not respect male feminists. Women do not respect weak, simpy, effeminate men. They do not. And it eventually will make them resent the man, and they will want to find masculinity elsewhere. I don't care how Christian you want to say you are and pretend like. The reality is the biology oftentimes overrides the professed things that come out of people's mouths. Now, we're all liable to those temptations. So I'm not trying to be mean, not trying to be unfair. But Trent wants to go hard. He wants to come at me constantly now. Okay, let's do it. Let's talk about what masculinity actually is. Let's talk about what the real problems are. Let's talk about behavior and hypocrisy, because that's where Trent wants to go. Now, what does Jordan Peterson say about men who identify as male feminists? And Jordan Peterson, I think he's got his issues as well, but he is very perceptive and correct. And you see this in the history of many scandals. Think about all the men, public leftists, Joss Whedon, for example, right? And there's been some other cases of very prominent Democrat, famous leftists who identified as male feminists. And lo and behold, it comes out, they are absolute moral savages. They're absolutely involved in some crazy stuff. Why is that? Am I saying that Trent is some crazy immoral? I don't know Trent personally, but when you get people like that, like your wife, going on podcasts and admitting things that are humiliating to the man, it's people are not wrong to say this is weird. Same with Candace. Where's Candace's husband in the midst of her spouting all this insane nonsense? Does she not have a husband with some degree of guard and care for what his wife is saying? It's just weird. It's bizarre, right? And if Jamie went on a podcast and started talking about how she was possibly developing feelings or whatever, on the road to developing feelings, because they want to qualify this a million times, because that's what Trent does in his Cope video where he tries to explain this away. He says, my wife didn't cheat. It wasn't anything. Well, why would she say that on a podcast? It's just weird, dude. It's bizarre. And it is humiliating. And what came out of all this? Victim. Trent plays the victim, as always. It's a Roman Catholic pattern. Ibarra, Lofton, all of them, they're always victims. Never wrong, never making serious mistakes. Victims. In fact, I'm surprised Voice of Reason hasn't said that he's a victim, that the poor chicks were texting him too much, and he was the victim in this scenario.
It's not only women that engage in it. As I said, it's female type antisocial behavior, but men can engage in reputation savaging too. And some of the worst of those are the men that ally themselves, so to speak, with feminists, so that they have a sneaky way into popularity with girls. There's no shortage of that kind of appalling psychopathic behavior either.
Well, yes, some of the bitchiest behaviour I've seen online is from men, and most of them identify as male feminists, but they can be quite misogynistic.
Peterson's absolutely right. As a lifelong, person in the realm of psychiatry and diagnosing and studying these things, You can disagree with, a lot of his positions, as we do, Gnosticism and all that. But he's absolutely right here in the tendency to think that you're going to get an in, you're going to be popular, that the women are going to like you when you pretend and when you signify that you're a male feminist. It is absolutely pathetic. And all of us out here in this sphere who have been normal dudes and have spent time dating various women or understanding female nature and understanding the reality of the world do not fall for this. That's why it's so popular to call out simping. Simping behavior, which is exactly what Trent exemplifies in these cases, does not actually show a person who is virtuous, who is pious. That's the intention. It actually shows a weak inability to understand and admit female nature, female biology, and the reality of what's going on. It's a form of lying and delusion. When you read the Proverbs, do you think Solomon has a male feminist attitude at all? Of course not. Now, that's not just Solomon, but even according to the New Testament, the Proverbs are inspired literature. So the Holy Spirit is actually speaking through the Proverbs. And how do modern feminists and male feminists and people in the so-called church say that Proverbs should be treated? As an old, outdated text when it comes to gender. In other words, I don't care what the Holy Spirit said through Proverbs. I have a new updated theology of masculinity, which is femininity. And if you think I'm wrong about that, you realize that this is the very argument that Tim Gordon makes against Trent. This is Tim's line of argumentation, not so much about Proverbs, but he's saying that the papal system has already stated that the attitude and the relationship between men and women is much more accurate in the ancient medieval world than the post-1960s feminist revolution and post even first wave feminist suffragette revolutions. These people all want to defend the first waves because they think that was rational, that was reasonable, and that's true male femininity, or male feminism. Male feminists are frauds, and I can tell you that 100% right away. Every dude that has good testosterone levels recognizes this simpery and this weakness. That is the root problem. It's not just going after, so you have to go after him because you don't have any arguments. We've already spent 7 years doing the arguments. What are you talking about? I've got hours. I've got at least 20 hours of video refuting point by point Trent Horn. In fact, we collated together 1 hour. We wanted to make it underneath 1 hour on the Clips channel here at Dyer Archive. 1 hour refuting every single low-tier theological argument from Trent Horn. So don't give me this nonsense. Well, you ain't got no real theology argument. You got to go after him personally. No, we never did that. Never even talked about him at any personal level until now because he's decided to do that. So let's watch his video and see, is he consistent with what he's saying and arguing? And then we're going to open it up to calls to anybody who has any questions, challenges. You want to come on and refute me? You're more than welcome to. You can have as much time as you want. You want to talk for 5 minutes? Be my guest. Just indicate that at the beginning. So here's the most recent video. I want to remind you too that the previous video is him saying that debate is no longer good. He's above debate now. He's too pious for debating because the theological area has been absolutely dominated by the Orthodox the last few years. Every one of their debates they go into, the polls say Orthodox majority win, Orthodox majority win, Orthodox majority win. Me versus Tim the last few years, Luigi, Pinesap, Alex Soren, whoever I'm forgetting, I apologize if I'm forgetting it, but over and over and over, Trent Doherty, huge debacle, just absolute chaos, not going good for the RCs. So where are we at now? Well, the mantle has fallen to Trent, and Trent's basically at a position where he's not going to engage. It doesn't sound like, given that he's better than debate now, he's not going to engage at the debate level anymore because evil Andrew Wilson and Jay Dyer have ruined it. But apparently he also has got a lot to say about Tim Gordon and the Roman Catholics as well who disagree with him.
Recently, Eastern Orthodox cultural commenter Andrew Wilson criticized me as a virtue signaler who is too critical of political Christians like him that are actually trying to fix the culture.
It's actually correct. You are a virtue signaling, piety signaler, and Andrew is spot on there.
Those people to me are like the lowest of the low of the low. You know, reps like Trent Horn, people like this.
So in today's episode, I'll talk about where I agree and disagree with Andrew and the difference between being a strong, assertive Christian and a bad, overly aggressive one. And to make sure I didn't misunderstand anything,
Don't be overly aggressive. Please make sure and up your estrogen levels. Please make sure and get a full dose of gay juice today and drink your soy milk.
Messaged Andrew and showed him this script, so my reply incorporates some of what he wrote to me in our exchange. First, let's take a look at Andrew's comments on the Patrick Bet-David show.
Most of my criticisms don't actually come from leftists, though many of them do. They actually come from a particular brand of Christian, virtue signalers, right? They're always trying to signal their virtues, and it's always like, oh my God, you smoke cigarettes, or you drink beer. Real Christians don't drink beer. Like, it's always petty criticisms. But anytime there's controversy around me or a clip taken out of context or something like this, these are the first people to rush in and give me universal condemnation, mostly so that my enemies will look at them. And these are leftists, right? They want leftists to look at them and think, you're the good Christians.
This is exactly what I've not seen this clip yet, by the way. So this is exactly what I was saying and exactly what Jordan Peterson said about the psychology of the male feminist. It's a weird, low-tier thing to think, if I show how much I'm on the side of these insane people and the women and the leftists, they'll like me and I'll get a big crowd and they're going to love me.
Andrew may be speaking of critics more generally here, but I don't have a problem with drinking beer or smoking. I have a hard time justifying habitual smoking, but if other Christians want to smoke or drink, I'm not going to say they're sinning. I do think smoking can come off as an embarrassing LARP when people lean into it as part of their identity as a Christian influencer. And I think Andrew would agree that no one is above criticism. In a previous video, which I'll link to below, I praised Wilson for using shrewd debate tactics that resulted in Matt Dillahunty rage quitting their debate. In that debate, Andrew playfully kept calm and got Dillahunty to flip out by bringing up stuff that was personal to him, like Dillahunty being in a de facto same-sex relationship.
Well, now, wait a minute. So Trent is okay with bringing up personal life contradictions with the way that you live. Yet he seemed to have a very big problem with people calling out the seeming inconsistency between what he says about feminism and the relationship between his wife and the guy at the place that she worked, beginning to form that relationship or possibly forming that relationship. So if that's the case, then he should have no problem with people calling into question the very thing that he made a response video saying not to call into question about. Now, again, I'm not talking about people who, quote, attacked his wife. If they did that, that's separate from people calling out the inconsistency in what Trent says male feminism will produce versus his own personal life and relationship as the head of a household.
Attempting to lie to people who claim men can be women isn't human flourishing. Why, you ask, would people be this over-the-top stupid? Well, it's simple. The good is the good, man. We have to do what's good for human society and human flourishing. And if you don't call these deranged lunatics something they obviously aren't, they might self-terminate. So in order to avoid that, we need to make everybody on planet Earth lie to them.
This guy's not serious and I'm leaving. James, if you want a refund, you let me know.
Well, good day, sir.
And so Andrew won the exchange. But on the Whatever podcast recently, Andrew was generally seen as losing this part of an exchange with a feminist who used the same tactic against him. She calmly brought up a legal fact about Andrew's wife, and then Andrew aggressively responded to her.
Your wife has 3 baby daddies and has been married twice before.
And you
under your religion.
You lick.
What is that?
You're a fucking don't talk shit about my wife, you stupid. Shut your fucking mouth. Shut your stupid mouth.
Your wife with the 3 baby
What did I just say?
Wife with the 3
Sorry,
baby
I'm
daddies?
sorry. Is she morally inconsequential in comparison to your licking?
Now,
So notice, Trent has no problem highlighting and calling out what he sees as inconsistencies in people's personal lives and what they say on the debate stage and publicly, which is exactly what people did in regard to Trent and his own wife's inconsistency when it came to the Matt Fradd Pints with Aquinas podcast, talking about her beginning to develop an affection and a relationship with a guy that could have become inappropriate. So again, there's a lot of hypocrisy that we're going to see in Trent Horn, because it's the same with the jokes. It's okay when Roman Catholics make immature, childish jokes. But if you do it at a certain thing that he doesn't like, or a certain way, or over his line, then it's the end of the world, and they're absolute victims. These are the people who play victim, but stab you in the back like the meme.
Our discussion with people insulting you, it's not uncommon to lose your cool. We're all only human. But this kind of aggressive behavior isn't uncommon for Andrew and other people in his orbit. So it's fair to point it out and discuss the merits of acting like this. Like any public proponent of Christianity, there's good and not so good elements to Andrew's approach. In our email exchange, Andrew said, "Sewing circle Christians tend to focus on why the person who is moving policy and people's minds on policy isn't acting in a pure enough way, and often will actually side with the critics of that person affecting change in order to purity signal." Now, I agree.
This is true.
It's cringy when some Christians do everything they can to please non-Christian critics, even by taking unnecessary pot shots at fellow Christians. It's a kind of ideological simping similar to male feminists who throw all men under the bus to appease women.
Oh, you mean like you as a male feminist? Because you identify as a first wave male feminist. So does that include you, or what is this talking about?
But my criticisms aren't because of how other people complain. It's because God's revelation has said we shouldn't engage in these behaviors, and I definitely care about appeasing God.
And it's like the whole time. So in other words, the whole time these people are burning the whole forest down around our ears, right? And I say, hey, put those fucking matches down. They're like, hey, don't say the F word. I'm like, well, wait, we got a bigger problem here.
Now, it's important to note that Trent's longtime, still, as I understand, good friend, Tim Gordon, says the F word constantly. Tim says it all the time. I've not yet seen Trent call out Tim Gordon on a public video for saying the F word. Did you want to say something? Hello? Are you talking to me?
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Remember what happened in the debate?
What's that?
Call out Trent Doherty?
Oh, I totally forgot about that. Remember when Trent Doherty lost his mind and just screamed and cussed me out, and then screamed and cussed Cleve out?
Yes.
So, again, this standard is not applied to their team. This is all very team-based stuff. And it's like, yes, we have this standard, but we pull this when we need it, when it's an ortho bro, when it's whoever. But we're not going to say it about Trent Doherty, who was an absolute disaster for them. And we're not going to say it about Tim Gordon, who says the F word all the time. So it's very convenient sort of rolling this out when it needs to be rolled out.
Catholics have
and what happens, again, Andrew's point right here is absolutely correct. What's going on right now? The biggest news story of our lifetime with Epstein stuff. And what's Trent's concern? Who's saying the F word on a PBD podcast? Trent's concern is, let's rebut Epstein and the Vatican. So immediate cope and cover mode. Why? Why is that the concern in the midst of the biggest scandal of our time? This is what is so ridiculous. This proves Andrew's point about sewing circle Christians is that the world will be burning down around them, and they're capitalizing on piety signaling over the freaking F word. It's just insane. Now I'm going to see what he thinks he can do to rebut the absurd conspiracy theories about the Vatican. And note, he's still quadrupling down that after Epstein, there's no global conspiracy. There's no tinfoil hat stuff going on. Remember, him and Jimmy Akin put out things saying Davos is not involved in a globalist elite conspiracy for a technocratic order. They put out information during the coup when he was pushing stabbies and masks. This dude is the ultimate normie.
A bigger problem here. Nope. You said the F word.
Yeah.
That's no good.
I agree with Andrew that being overly puritanical about language, i.e. what I'd call true tone policing, is lame. I covered this in my episode on Christian swearing, where I said profanity in itself isn't wrong and it could be justified in some cases. I use the example.
Yeah, because he knows that that's exactly what Tim Gordon argues.
Of Stephen Colbert engaging Philip Zimbardo, who said that God was wrong and the devil was right. When Colbert gave him the correct theology on the matter, Zimbardo said, "You learned well in Sunday school," to which Colbert epically replied, "I teach Sunday school, mother effer." But that's different than just
Oh, it's different. So when Colbert, who is an absolute disgusting, degenerate Catholic goblin, uses it in a comedic way, it's acceptable. But if I make fun of fake Bishop Tilda Swinton, a radical anti-white Marxist activist, I'm the bad person. So even right here within this stupid video, he's already contradicted his own allowances, which shows you that there's no consistent application of some moral puritanism about holy speech. It's just arbitrary to figure out when and where it's applicable. What do you mean? I mean, Colbert at least used to say he's Catholic. I don't know whether he is or not, but he's identified, at least in the past, as a member of the Catholic Church, I think. Could you give me a espresso and also a water? Thank you.
dropping an F-bomb to insult somebody, like Andrew does in this clip.
I will never be able to convince you of my worldview. Charlie, I just think, honestly, you're too f***ing stupid to understand them.
St. Paul repeatedly says that overseers in the church must be gentle and not quarrelsome or violent, and that all Christians must put away anger, wrath, malice, slander, and foul talk from their mouth. Jesus said in Matthew 5:22, whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, shall be liable to the hell of fire. And 2 Timothy chapter 2 said,
yeah, the text is not making a joke or making fun of people. The text is accuses his brother and thus liable to the council. So that's some Roman Catholic translation. But regardless, there's many places in Scripture where we're told to actually identify the fool. And it is appropriate to call people fools. In fact, most of the church fathers, when dealing with persistent, obstinate heretics, call them demons, idiots, morons, devils, dogs, morons, etc., over and over and over. This is a common refrain. St. Cyril of Jerusalem says in the Catechetical Lectures that all heretics should be hated. They should be loathed for their system and for their error and for their theology. Now, again, does that mean that we can't also at the same time love them? No, it is possible. It is possible to have disdain for someone and at the same time love them, wanting the best for them. But sometimes what's best for people, especially exceedingly wicked frauds like Bishop Tilda Swinton, they should be publicly called out and rebuked. And that's the only thing. It's amazing, actually, to me that that's the only thing that he could find to call me out on. Now, there's nobody worse at this than Scam Shamu. Is he going to apply this to his own Catholic apologetic buddy? I'm assuming that they're buddies in the sense of the same church, his own ally in Catholicism, Scam Shamu? Or is this only selectively applied when Trent decides that you can say the F word when it's Stephen Colbert in a joke setting against an atheist or something like that? You can't say it against another person. Okay, so he's interjecting his arbitrary standards to justify his own moral stance. And this whole thing is about his moral position, why he's moral and nobody else matches his morality. That's the problem here, is that the debate has shifted away from the issues and the topics into piety signaling. And once you're there, that's you on the ropes. That's the last legs of the defense of your system, because you've got nothing else to come at in terms of the system. You can only come after the perceived moral infractions and why you're morally superior. That's why we've seen in the last couple of days just a flood of Roman Catholic bots piety signaling like crazy. Why? My thesis is they are concerned about the attachments of Epstein to John Paul II and the Vatican. Why is that such a big deal? If it calls into question the sanctity of John Paul II, and that's the key point here, is that Epstein identifies himself as getting special gifts, particularly architectural novelties from John Paul II, and because associates and allies of Epstein say in the emails that Epstein spent significant time at the Vatican, and because we do have vindication of Epstein being blessed at the Vatican during that time period, this means that the sanctity of John Paul II would obviously be in question. And that means that sainthood in the Roman Catholic system would fall apart. That means Roman Catholic dogma would fall apart because sainthood is part of the ordinary universal magisterium.
The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kindly to everyone, an apt teacher, forbearing, correcting his opponents with gentleness. Now, if I were to just tell people all of this without citing scripture, they'd probably say I was effeminately tone policing them. So I appreciate when Nick Fuentes admits he thinks this way about the Bible itself.
Rockshaka sent $20. Those nerds and simps seem to forget biblical masculinity involves Samson killing 100 people, David killing a giant, and Jesus whipping people.
Yeah, they forgot that then they worked out. In the Bible, they did deadlifts, and they ate raw eggs, and they beat people up. Biblical masculinity is based.
Typical bro.
Let's just be honest. Biblical masculinity,
By the way, I'm not seeing a lot of Nick Fuentes in a while, but that's funny that I guess I'm not the only person that does the retard voice. But I'm sure Trent would call out that it's mean to say the word retard.
The Bible tells men to be feminine. Like, let's be honest. Let's just be honest.
Typical bro sent $20. Hey, Nick. Right.
Let's not cope about it. The Bible is not a story of like men being jacked and going to the gym. Okay?
Typical bro
Let's
sent
just start
$20.
there.
Hey, Nick.
But that's only true if you think masculinity is raw power that doesn't give an F about anything, instead of seeing true masculinity as controlled strength that submits to God and patiently endures hardship.
Yeah, but your own church prior to the 1960s in Vatican II, Trent, did not teach that first wave feminism was an acceptable Roman Catholic masculinity or femininity. In fact, pre-Vatican II teaching actually says what Tim Gordon says, which is that the role of women is to not at all supplant the role of men. And that includes gender dysphoria of thinking that women should in any way predominantly be in masculine roles. Now, I don't necessarily agree with every single point of Tim Gordon, but Tim Gordon is way more correct in Catholic teaching and Catholic theology, traditionally speaking, than what Trent Horn is pushing. But Trent Horn is a modern neo-Catholic that absolutely supports all of the Vatican II nonsense that he has to. And so it only makes sense that he would support today's Vatican, which tends towards skittles and gay feminist theology.
1 Corinthians 16:13, Paul even says to be strong and andrethesai, literally act like men, because men are the standard of strength.
And so those people to me are like the lowest of the low of the low. Well, I mean, if you want specific names.
Specific names if you're comfortable saying. Who are some of them?
So I would say people like Lila Rose, representatives like Lila Rose. I would even say, reps like Trent Horn, people like this. These are people who they themselves may not necessarily levy the criticism directly, but it's the influence that they have over the various audiences that they have that then go and direct these criticisms towards you.
Got it.
And this is correct, because this is the same critique that Tim Gordon makes of all of these same Catholics. And I don't have to necessarily agree with every single position of Tim Gordon. I'll give you an example where I disagree. Tim thinks that Proverbs 31 is like uniquely some sort of Hebrew Jewish queen text, and it only applies to Jewish queens. No, it's a pattern, I would say, for the godly woman. It's not just for Hebrew queens. So I disagree with Tim on that point as an example. And so it's not necessarily wrong, in my view, for a woman to do a side job, or if she can, not at the expense of the children, if she wants to have a part-time job or something like that. Again, that doesn't jeopardize the household or the man in that relationship first and foremost, or the children first and foremost, right? So that's one area of minor disagreement I would have with Tim Gordon. But in the main, when it comes to the Roman Catholic system, you have to keep in mind, Trent doesn't seem to be aware that pre-Vatican II popes already spoke on this. They already talked about, at the time of the suffrage movement, the problems of suffragism and why suffragette ideology coming out of the French Revolution is just an older form of liberalism that today's conservatives think is a conservative position. Just like the people that defend democracy and last year's, like the Democrats and the Republicans, right? We talk about this. The GOP is defending, the the liberalism of 20 years ago, the Democratic Party, as now conservatism. Well, guess what? The Tradcat apologists are defending the liberalism of the French Revolution as traditional Catholic conservative values. That's how ignorant these people actually are.
Though I never.
Tim has multiple places and examples where he goes through those older papal minds and papal quotes. I don't even care to do that. It's boring to me. I used to do that. I used to live that world. But there are multiple pre-Vatican II papal teachings on the appropriate role of men and women and why suffragette nonsense is an earlier version of feminism. That is, by the way, what Trent Horn openly defends. He says he's a male feminist. But Rachel Wilson is absolutely correct in her book, Occult Feminism, where she says you could not have today's trends without all the waves of feminism, including the first one. Even the first one was a intentional social revolution to upend male-female dynamics. And as Tim has hammered home, and as Lila Rose and these other people like Trent Horn don't get, is feminism is the original gender dysphoria. Not because it's teaching the TRANZ stuff explicitly, but because it's beginning to plant the seeds of women taking the role of men and men taking a step back, hands off, let the slay queens do their shit, bro.
Or actually see these people in the arena debating these social issues with anybody. They'll do abortion debates, things like this, but I never see them surrounded with a panel of like the worst degenerates on earth debating all of their worldviews simultaneously. But they have tons of criticisms for people who do. And I'm like, well, where are you?
No, I'm sympathetic to some of Andrew's criticism. For example, I'll get people who criticize how I debate non-Catholics like Gavin Ortland or Alex O'Connor and say I'm too nice or I'm not blunt enough. To which I say, okay, then why don't you debate the best defenders of Protestantism or atheism and show us how it's done?
By the way, I've tried that. And Alex O'Connor, funny enough, will not debate me and declined to debate me on more than one occasion, but he will debate Trent Horn. What does that tell you? That tells you that there are certain people that they're so soft that they're not afraid to debate with. But everybody knows that they will not debate me, including Trent Horn, who won't do a new debate with me. You blocked him, so how could he debate you? I blocked him because he already said months ago he won't debate. And I have no interest in interacting with him anymore. That's why.
Andrew's criticism is similar. Don't critique how I engage people unless you're willing to engage them yourself. But I don't see how this criticism applies to me in particular. I used to do debates surrounded by college students, and now I focus on just engaging the best defenders of other worldviews in one-on-one debates.
But Trent, you just said in your previous video that you don't like debates anymore. So are you going to do debates or are you not going to do debates? And why would you not debate the position that I've been hammering for several years now, which is causing quite a few people to leave your church? In fact, I'll show you comments of people saying that they are now leaving the Roman Catholic Church because of the arguments that we're making, including the geopolitical arguments. Why do none of the Roman Catholics want to address this issue? And you can keep pretending that, oh, it's a dumb argument, I don't want to listen to it. Good. Keep pretending that, because that's not going to keep people in the Roman Catholic Church, I assure you. Nor will the constant piety signaling and moral signaling that will keep the lowest tier people there. But maybe that's what you want.
I've applied to be on Jubilee, and I'm open to being on panels with hostile opponents, but I don't want to engage in a fruitless shouting match. I'm also not sure if I want to do something like a whatever podcast discussion, because one of its main effects is just giving free publicity to OnlyFans pornographers, though it can be a good place to evangelize these people. But even in environments like the Whatever Podcast or Jubilee, there are political Christians like Charlie Kirk or Michael Knowles who have done well without resorting to the more aggressive tactics that Andrew Wilson uses.
And where are you, by the way, when anybody wants to debate you on why it is that you're so inactive when it comes to the culture war and social issues, right? They turn all that stuff down. They refuse to argue with the red pillars. They refuse to argue with any of these people. They literally just refuse to engage. Tons of criticisms, absolute refusal to engage.
And the same thing applies to the apologetics domain from this whole crowd of moral piety signalers. Yes, Trent did a debate with me 5 or 6 years ago, but he won't do it again. And what has been the constant refrain and the excuse? Oh, he's too mean. He's too mean. He's too mean. Again, an effeminate excuse to not debate when we've already shown that in a formal setting, I can absolutely be civil to you and we can have no meanness. There was no meanness in the debate that I had with Trent Horn. So he knows that there's no infallible necessity to me being mean to him. And imagine even being at this stage where actual men in the public sphere are saying they won't engage in a debate because people are mean. This is so fake and gay. Just that alone is fake and gay.
To culture war issues, I'm not sure what Andrew means. I did a discussion with Alex of Playing with Fire on premarital sex, which was fruitful, and I debated Pearl on men and marriage, which felt like banging my head against a wall.
How do you think a man should approach the subject of headship in their marriage? What does that mean?
I think it's more that women should be obedient to their husbands in all things.
Do you agree with Trent, though, so long as it's rational?
I see a lot of women weaponize that, but yeah.
Yeah, just as husbands should correct their wives if they have a really bad idea that could hurt the marriage, wives have that same role because husbands sometimes get pretty bad ideas that can be harmful.
Yeah, but who determines it?
The person with a rational brain in the marriage.
Yeah, so the man.
Yeah.
So I guess so what's nice is in this debate we know which side is the more rational one, right?
In our message,
Trent thought that was an own. No, Trent, I don't think you understood. That actually wasn't an own. Like, whatever you think of Pearl was correct in that statement. In your attempt to try to equalize the idea of headship, which is this equalitarian position that many Roman Catholics take, that Tim Gordon is so vehement to oppose. I mean, bro, did you not catch that? Now, again, Roman Catholics have said, Jay, you clipped Trent. You clipped Trent. What has Trent done throughout this whole video? Oh, he clips 10, 20-second clips of people. So I'm confused. Is it dishonest to clip people, or is it actually okay? Because many Roman Catholics went after me for my short calling out Trent, saying that the way that we know Catholic dogma is when it's manifestly evident. They said, well, you shouldn't clip him. This is so dishonest. Trent is clipping. What do you mean?
Exchange, Andrew said that Christian apologists don't focus on dating, culture, world affairs, policy, politics, and prescriptions. Well, in many cases, that's because our own audience and critics tell us to stay in our lane and not talk about those things. Although I do talk about...
What does that have to do with whether or not you should talk about it or not? So, I mean, are you just a subservient person at all times, Trent, when even you just obey your critics? So when a critic tells you to stay in your own lane, you stop talking about it. How about this? I'm your critic, Trent. I'm going to tell you as a masculine man to stop talking about this nonsense that you don't know about. So will you now stay in your own lane?
About some of those things. And I think Christians should engage manosphere content. But I'm not going to do formal debates or discussions on fringe topics, silly things, or prudential judgments we can reasonably disagree about.
Yeah, but what you think are fringe topics are actually now the biggest news story in the world, like Epstein and the connections to John Paul II. And you're obviously covering up for that and acting like it's a fringe topic, including the subject that I've asked you for years to publicly debate, the geopolitical entanglements of the Vatican. Now, when I first presented that to Trent, his response was, I don't even know what that means. What would it even mean to debate the geopolitics of the Vatican? So I said, here, I'll put it in a more precise formulation for you. What's a better explanation for the actions of the papacy in the last century? The promise of Peter that it has indefectibility and infallibility, or geopolitical entanglements and power elites turning the theology to their own desires? What's a better explanation for that 20th century papal zeitgeist? Now, if my position is correct, and if I made that case convincingly, that would mean that Jesus, again, is not promising a special Petrine charism to protect it and guide it as it's become an organized crime syndicate, as it's become a tool of globalization, UNESCO-type values, which Pope Francis openly said he supported, as well as Davos and its values. That would mean that Jesus is not telling us that we have to submit to a corrupt, wicked geopolitical tool, pushing all of the things that are absolutely contrary to Christianity. Well, but what about all the times when they don't push it? It has nothing to do with whether it's a contradiction, right? If you say, well, but there's all these places where the papacy says good stuff, that's the first thing they always run to. All that tells me is that it's a double-speak bureaucracy. I don't care that they say some good things over here. Jesus says to not be double speaking, to not speak out of both sides of your mouth. So when there's double speak, that immediately suggests a lack of honesty, a lack of integrity. And who can honestly say that the Vatican has not become geopolitically corrupted, which is immediately why this is such a big deal right now, given the Epstein information. That's why this is coming out. The Vatican is obviously implicated in several emails, and they've immediately rushed to cover that up and to explain it away. That's what they do. It's what they've always done. It's what happened with Bernard Law and the abuse cases. It's what happened with the guy that ran what it was, Legionnaires of Christ or whatever, the massive abuse cases. They cover up because they're liars and they don't care about what's true. For them, truth is a making operation. It's a creative process to make this system work. They're system builders. They're like Hegel or Kant or any of the philosophers or Aquinas. They want to build and construct a vast system, and that's the deity, this big system. And then when that system has internal systemic level contradictions, you update the system with development of doctrine and new copes and copy and paste methods. That is why they are so worried and why Trent is having to double down. He's concerned that Orthodox people, Ortho bros, are getting on massive podcasts. I did interviews all week long. I had almost 70,000 people watch a 6-hour live stream. I had 3.3 or 5,000 live at one point. For my channel, that's massive. And a lot of that was talking about Vatican relations. Yes, we covered Mossad and Rothschilds extensively, but we also talked about the Vatican angle, which none of these people will talk about, other than Trent's cover-up video, which we will watch in a moment.
2 Timothy 2:23 says, have nothing to do with stupid, senseless controversies. You know that they breed quarrels. I don't think there's a big difference between the political arm and the apologetics branch that Andrew references. To me, they're two sides of the same coin. Apologetics shows people Christianity is true, and politics works to influence people to enact various policies that should reflect the truth.
Well, then you should be all the more willing to debate the geopolitics of the Vatican. Let me give you a concrete example of where I can prove that that's absolutely necessary and interconnected. Vatican II's document Gaudium et Spes, as we have pointed out in many videos and lectures and talks, is a political position paper of Vatican II adopting many Fabian socialist, Marxist, open borders, de-armament positions, including many statements supporting the United Nations and UNESCO type stuff. So if the Vatican has a explicit position paper, part of its presumed magisterium of Vatican II, Gaudium et Spes, why would you not defend its positions from the Vatican if you just admitted that political positions reflect apologetic positions? So him then saying I don't have to address the geopolitics of the papacy because I don't do that, it's not what I cover, it's not relevant, it's fringe. You just said it's not fringe. Do you even know what's in Gaudium et Spes? Have you even read it? I bet he hasn't even read it.
But in many cases, to convince people to do something like vote against abortion, you need to convince them the Christian position is true, or you need to do apologetics. And I agree that to change culture, you have to do political things like lobby, campaign for candidates, and argue for policy changes and prudential actions among individuals and communities. These things are outside of my wheelhouse, so I'm grateful for the Christians who do them well. One example I'd mention would be Virginia House of Delegates member Nick Freitas, whose show I went on earlier this year. Nick is a great example of how to be tough and masculine. I certainly wouldn't want to get into a fight with the guy. How to advance God's kingdom through politics, and how to be charitable while doing all of this. In fact, the most masculine men that I know, the guys who could legit kill you with their bare hands, they don't go around puffing out their chests and verbally abusing people.
Now, again, for those that are curious, here is a 38-minute talk that was clipped over at Dyer Central, just specifically on Trent's official political position that he must support via the Vatican, aka Gaudium et Spes, the Marxist Fabian socialist document confirmed by Paul VI in 1965. So this is the Vatican's official geopolitical statement right there. Now, he mentioned Nick Freitas, who I thought that, is he a Protestant? So his example of masculinity actually has to go to a Protestant. Interesting that he didn't mention Tim Gordon. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember I had some DMs with Nick Freitas, and we were going to do a podcast, and then he ghosted me, I guess because I'm too mean, or he found out that I debate Protestants. But somebody correct me, is Nick Freitas even a Roman Catholic? Because that's very telling to me that when Trent thinks of in his mind the first most masculine Christian commentator that's out there, he goes to a Protestant. He doesn't even go to Tim Gordon. Like, what? I mean, okay, I guess. So, but this guy might be a Catholic. I don't know. Let's see what he is. Do you guys know? Yeah, he's a Protestant. He doesn't even mention his own Tim Gordon. By the way, Tim Gordon is a buff dude. I'm pretty sure Tim would beat my ass if we got in a fight. So it's kind of an insult, I would say. Like, he doesn't even think of his own masculine Roman Catholic dudes. Who's that other guy that, what's his name, Mano? The guy that does the masculinity podcast, or used to do it with Tim Gordon. I mean, that's a buff Roman Catholic straight dude. He didn't even think of any of those. He immediately went to a Protestant dude. This is just weird.
Guys who do that are usually overcompensating for some insecurity. True masculinity reveals itself in being assertive without being unnecessarily aggressive. For example, in William Albrecht's debate with Ryan from NeedGod.net, Albrecht exposed how Ryan used a fake quote from the Church Fathers in a previous video.
Are you sure you want to go to William Albrecht for your Paragons of masculinity examples? I mean, William Albrecht has it's got the biggest list of anybody out there. So if you want to go to William Albrecht, you better be watching out for that list, because masculinity, by the way, this is something else I've noticed that a lot of these guys don't even touch, is everybody immediately thinks of bodily strength. And that makes sense. I mean, obviously that's kind of one of the first things that you would think about in terms of masculinity, but let me give you an example of masculinity and bodily strength not matching up. Don't we all know that a lot of the workout, obsessed body workout stuff sphere is gay? Of course. So wait a minute. If it's masculinity and working out that is characteristic, if working out is characteristic of masculinity, then why is it so full of gay dudes? Also, I went to high school with a lot of guys who were very buff, athletic jock dudes. And guess what happened to many of those guys? Oh, they got cucked by various women, left by various women, cheated on by various women, and are, in many cases, now fat, beer swilling, football watching simps. What am I getting at here? He's missing one of the key components, which he himself doesn't understand, which is mental strength. There are plenty of dudes that are physically masculine, like, say, Wes Watson, but are mentally absolutely fragile and effeminate. It's just funny to me that these guys all immediately think of bodily strength, which is a component of masculinity. Dudes should be in the gym. Dudes should be strong, physically fit. Absolutely. You should be able to do a lot of push-ups, a lot of pull-ups. I can. But it's also mental strength, psychological strength that really expresses masculinity, that enables you to not be a simp. In fact, it's worse to be a simp than to lose your temper at sometimes, as dudes often do. Dudes do that. Think back to the schoolyard. You and your buddies, you get mad, you scrap, you have a brawl. Afterwards, your best buds, you're playing Nintendo. That's what guys do. That's normal behavior in the dude realm. Dudes talk crap. You're going to play basketball. You're talking crap to your buddies. You're trying to get in their head, mess them up, and then play in the game. Right? That's what dudes do. But these people are not normal dudes. They think that normal dude behavior is the worst behavior. And so they've actually bought into the feminist view of what Christianity is and male feminism is to castigate normal male behavior. Yes, men can fall into vices. They're prone to their own vices. I'm not supporting male vices, but what I'm saying is that this is all so wrong-headed as to what masculinity is, what Christian masculinity is, and they immediately don't even think about the number one thing that would characterize masculinity, which is rational strength, mental strength. In fact, he mentioned Freitas, who is, it turns out he's a Green Beret. We've talked to a lot of military dudes over the years, et cetera, guys that went into black ops, guys that went into, intelligence operations, et cetera. Do you think the most important characteristic for those guys was merely physical strength? No, of course not. It's mental strength. And mental strength means that you would know and identify realities, and including biological realities about men and women. So just from a biological perspective, focusing on male strength, as Trent just did with Nick Freitas, wouldn't that tell you that women are also thus necessarily, typically, physically, the inferior? Of course. That's common sense. Yet, Trent seems to triple, quadruple down to defend the position of first-wave feminism that there's some sort of equalitarian relationship between men and women in marriage, which is just simply not true.
He probably got from a lazy Google search, and Albrecht was assertive in not letting Ryan weasel his way out of this revelation.
I want to pause for a moment and give you a chance to read the whole of that quote.
Again, citing the most lispy, leather daddy Roman Catholic apologist out there, William Albrecht, who wears a cassock with a Roman Catholic dog collar. Has anybody explained or found out why a layman is wearing a Roman Catholic priest outfit? And why on his icon wall did he have a giant poster of himself in his gay workout gear? I'm not joking. We covered that in the Albrecht video the other day. This is his example of masculinity. A Protestant dude and lispy leather daddy Albrecht. This is comedy itself right here.
Can you get that full quote and read it for us?
I don't have it on hand, but I can
I will
find
wait
it for us. It's fine if you want to waste your time on this. That's all good.
It is brutal for you because I know where you got it from. I know you got all the.
It's brutal for you because I know where you got it from, because I'm a frequent traveler to list.com, and to also I have many profiles on grinders.com. So if you guys want to message me afterwards when I take off my fake cassock, you can find me at grinders.com.
This quote's from google.com. You did zero research. Are you aware, Ryan?
You did zero research. Zero research. Again, this is his example of proper masculinity. The guy with the gayest lisp since James White.
That is a fake quote? It doesn't even come from St. Jerome?
Christians shouldn't be pushovers, but we also shouldn't, as Andrew says, do everything we can to maintain political power. After all, Christians can't do evil so that good may come, as Paul says in Romans 3:8. In our email exchange, Andrew said, politics is ugly, dirty, brutal. There is doxing, swatting, assassination attempts, reputational destruction, slander, and rumor mongering. That's true. But Christians should not use those tactics against their opponents, even if they are used against us. We shouldn't dox people knowing that this could lead to them being harmed. We shouldn't spread lies, and we definitely shouldn't assassinate people, even if they talk about killing us. In our exchange, Andrew said that he agrees we shouldn't do those things either. But I would add onto the list that we shouldn't even be verbally abusive when we are mocked. We should instead imitate our Lord, who endured abuse without striking his abusers. That's why I agree with what Joel Berry from the Babylon Bee said on Tim Pool's.
Here we go. Now let's go to the Zionists. Let's go to the evangelical Zionist disinformation outlet to prove our case on morals. So where are we deriving our examples from? Protestants, Skittles Roman Catholics, and Zionist evangelicals? This is laughable.
Podcast about how Christians are handicapped in fighting evil because we have principles and our opponents don't.
That is what makes this fight so unfair, all right? Because our enemy is a...
By the way, this is another person who will not debate because he just wants to spout evangelical Zionist quasi-dispensationalist theology, and he doesn't do debates. So, of course not. Because I've DM'd with this guy trying to get him to do a debate. He will not do it. And I'm sure that it would conveniently come up that if you pressed him, it's because I'm mean and have toxic behavior. Now, I'm also surprised in the midst of all these whining rants that Trent hasn't found a way to call us racist. I'm surprised he hasn't called me racist yet. But maybe that's the next phase. That's the next level. He's going to go full Professor Dave and make impressions and jokes are now going to be full racist. Because at root, I think what we're seeing is that Trent has a veneer of Christian conservatism, but really it's just a kind of mushy lib view ultimately.
By any means necessary enemy. They only want power. They'll do whatever it takes to achieve it. And here we are on our side.
So, I mean, I'm curious, does Joel Berry's commentary there apply to Netanyahu? Is he talking about the political class like Bibi? Is he talking about those people? Or is that exempted because he thinks that the atheist nation state of Israel is God's chosen people? Who, by the way, Trent Horn also, I can very clearly tell, only wants to come after people that also don't express the correct geopolitical positions. I'm curious if Trent has any criticisms of rabbinic philosophy. And I'm told through the grapevine that he's actually about to do a video, perhaps defending the Talmud from misinterpretations of the Talmud. So what does that tell you about the direction that Trent's going in?
As Christians, I'm a Christian.
And speaking of that, he already kind of did this by tone policing me about a ridiculous joke about a ridiculous con man, Bishop Tilda Swinton. So it's more important to tone police me over a funny joke than it is to call out a rabid, anti-white, vicious huckster, Marxist, openly Marxist. That's more important. It's more important to defend John Paul II's relationship to the Vatican, to Epstein, than to actually investigate it and see what's going on. It's more important to triple down and defend the Vatican at all costs now that the Vatican teaches essentially a Judaized theology post-Vatican II. And there is a video right there showing that Vatican II teaches through Gaudium et Spes, Fabian Marxist socialist teaching.
We have rules, we have morals, we have things that we can't do, right? I think that we should do whatever it takes, tactically and otherwise.
By the way, isn't this interesting that Trent's approach is to build bridges in an ecumenist way by citing these ridiculous people like this guy as the examples of Christian piety and Christian media, the paragons of Christian media are evangelical Zionists, Protestants, and absolute creep Roman Catholics like Albrecht.
To win short of violating Scripture. And that's what makes the fight unfair. But here's the thing. Here's where faith comes in as a Christian.
That's a good way to put it. Trent Horn. Trent wants to liken himself to the Council of Trent, right? Doesn't he call his podcast Council of Trent? Well, the Council of Trent teaches the death penalty as part of natural justice and the Catechism of Trent. So I think it's more like Trend Horn is much more appropriate.
We believe in a God who rules the universe, who is on the throne, who used Gideon's 300 men to defeat an army of thousands, who used David to defeat a giant, who says, trust not in horses and chariots, but...
Okay, whatever, dude. All right, now he's going to get to me and why I'm a bad person.
Do as Christians is abusively attack or insult those we disagree with.
Okay, so a rabid, vicious, Marxist, con man, activist, black, fake bishop. You guys all know that the black, fake activist people get in on a grift like Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Jesse Jackson. They're not even actual preachers. They're just activists. Everybody knows this. Well, guess what? Bishop, whatever his name is, Tilda Swinton, is one of those. Publicly. rabid. So Trent's more concerned with tone policing a funny, ridiculous joke, calling out his fake apostolic claims. You better put some respect on my name. Give me a break, dude. You're a Al Sharpton huckster. But according to Trent Horn, you shouldn't even have that kind of a joke about a huckster. His own church thinks this guy's a fake bishop. But this is all he could find to try to say that I'm a bad Christian because I made a joke about a ridiculous fraud person.
You can use blunt language to call someone out for being dumb, evil, or both. But there are clear cases where the language goes too far.
Bro, don't hurt the feelings of the blacktivists. How dare you hurt the feelings of a blacktivist? How dare you call me Bishop Tilda Swinton? Put some respect on that name. Put some respect on that name.
And just makes Christians look bad. For example, Catholic philosopher Trent Doherty has profanely lashed out at his opponents.
Since you have teamed up with a
Oh, so at least some final admission of a Roman Catholic who did something wrong. This is finally.
Bisexual atheist to defend your theology.
That's
And
a
I
piece of
see-
shit. That's a piece of shit move, you piece of shit. You.
And even threatened to beat them up.
Do you have any boxing experience or
do you want
mixed
fight?
martial arts?
When Jay Dyer was on Piers Morgan, he repeatedly mocked Pentecostal prelate Talbert Swan by calling him Tilda Swinton.
Bishop, you put some respect on that name. Trent Horn. Listen to me, Trent Horn. You better put some respect on that name. It's Bishop Tilda Swinton. By the way, isn't Trent not respecting him but by not calling him Bishop Tilda Swinton?
The name of a Hollywood actress.
It's the same logic that this guy has in terms of his liberation theology.
My name
which
is
he does
Bishop
hold.
Talbert Swan. My name is not.
My name is Bishop Talbot Swan. Yeah, Trent, he's not a real bishop. He's a con man. He's a fraud. And it was funny to call him Tilda Swinton.
This guy, you've been dealing with me in a very disrespectful
Yes, Bishop
manner.
Tilda Swinton. Excuse me, Bishop Tilda
My name
Swinton.
is
Excuse me.
Albert Swan.
Sam Shamoon has also frequently.
Everybody knows that shit was funny, dude. Just like when I called the two gaytheists. Millions of people thought that was funny from the clips that got millions of views. This is ridiculous. And by the way, Trent, I'll send you some of the worst stuff because that's not even the bad stuff for me. That's actually funny stuff. I'll try to find you some clip where I actually made a mistake. I'm trying to think, when did I actually get mad? It's been a long time since I really just lashed out, got mad on the stream. I don't even know when.
Insulted his critics.
The stupid fat cow? No, it was by your mother being a Shia prostitute in Iran. Shut the hell up, you stupid bastard. You stupid dumb.
So this is a perfect time to give a shout out to the #1 most not craziest Roman Catholic apologists, your boy Sam Shamoon. And we're going to play a little bit of a musical interlude just to take a little bit of a break because I'm going to go TT to the girls' room. And then we're going to open it up for some calls. So here's a little bit of Sam Shamoonery for you guys while I go TT.
Sam Shamoon. That's actually good word, though.
By the way, I wonder maybe what we should have Trent set up a congregation for the morals of internet discourse, right? The papacy has their holy office. We need Trent heading up a holy office of appropriate public moral statements for commentators. I think he would do the best. He's certainly the most moral of all of us, clearly. He's demonstrated that beyond a shadow of a doubt in these videos. We need you at the head of the congregation for the holy office of moral public commentary, because we're all lost without the moral compass that is Trent Horn. So thank you, Trent, for calling attention to this. I definitely want you to be the Inquisitor General for internet discourse. No one else could be more moral in that position. So we're going to have to see, Trent, do you approve of this video making fun of Sam Shamoon, or have I once again fallen into the sad moral abyss that is Jay Dyer and toxic orthodoxy?
With you dance with Sam Shamoon on the dance floor. Sam Shamoon, he's at the dance club. He's single. He's got a little bit of dust on his shoulder. clean up his nasty ass cat apartment. Sam Shamoon is on the dance floor. Ladies, orbs, all are welcome. Please dance with Shamoon. I've got moves. Sam Shamoon. All you pretty orbs on the dance floor. Muta with the Shia tonight. All you pretty orbs on the dance floor. I see a lot of orbs lonely tonight. Big shapely orbs, come and dance with Sam. He's single on town. Your mom's doing Muta with a Shia. He's got man boobs, he can relate to you. Sam Shamoon's on the dance floor. Tonight, all you orbs on the floor tonight. Tonight's night. Every orb on the dance floor. Dance with Sam Shamoon. Muta with the Shia tonight. Every orb on the dance floor. Dance with Sam Shamoon. Muta with the Shia tonight. Do the Sam Shuffle. Sam Shuffle tonight. Muta with Sam tonight. It's Muta on the dance floor. Muta on the dance floor. You son of a devil. All you pretty orbs on the dance floor. Muta with the Shia tonight. All you pretty orbs on the dance.
Oh, this is just morally reprehensible. I cannot believe anyone would dare to try to make these kinds of jokes. Absolutely morally reprehensible. Anyway, I hope that we can get the Holy Office for moral internet discourse going. And I nominate Trent Horn to be Inquisitor General. I can't think of anybody more moral. So, but there we go. If you want to watch the rest of that, it is, of course, at my channel right here. Now, guys, remember, we are on a streaming explosion. We are going stream crazy because guess what you get tonight? You get more toxic masculinity after this stream as I go live with the one and the only Little Aids. Yes, I'm talking about Tristana herself, or Z-Self, Zimself. Tristana Zimself will be making a return immediately after this stream, streaming with me. You got me right. You've heard it right. What? You actually talked Tristana Zimself coming out of retirement for a stream? I did. And immediately after the stream, we will be live. I am on a stream explosion tour. That sounds weird and gross, but let's finish Trent's video here, and then we will listen to his Epstein video and see where that goes.
Let me tell you why, David, you're a stupid, fat bastard. You're too much of a narcissistic, sociopathic scum because...
By the way, on what basis did Trent decide to bleep in the previous video the word shit, but then not bleep all of Scam Shamu's? Like, again, it's funny to me, like, where's Trent's line between the words that are the bad words and then the words that are not bad words that you don't bleep out? Again, this is just funny to me.
Because the Bible is busy talking about your mother being a whore. Your mother's a whore. You're a bastard. You're effeminate queer. You're gay. And Satan's proud of you because you're a whore.
Muta with the Shia tonight. Every orb on the dance floor. Dance, Sham Shamoon.
Whore of Satan. You stupid whore.
Thankfully, in November, Sam asked for prayers to stop swearing and claimed the insult, "your mother is a whore,"
yeah, right,
was a metaphor for his opponents being children of the whore of Babylon.
I have to give credit. That's actually funny. That's actually funny. I mean, Sam Shamoon is absolutely batshit crazy, but that's actually fun. I mean, he's insane, but that's funny.
Not a statement about his opponent's mother's literal sexual history. It seems like Sam won't use that language in the future, and I hope he doesn't, because most people...
He must be joking, Trent, surely, right? I love the grace extended by Trent to one of the absolute worst people out there, Scam Shamu. Funny how nobody else gets that same grace extended that he extends to one of the absolute worst offenders of what he's critiquing in this video. There's no one on the internet worse than Sam Shamu when it comes to this topic. And it's amazing the level of grace that Trent's granting to Scam Shamu, but I don't really detect that with the Ortho Bros or anyone else.
People would take what he said as a literal insult and not a metaphor about their own sinfulness. When Jesus insulted people, he accurately described them as hypocrites or evil. He was...
Oh, no, wait a minute. So now we're getting to when you can, according to Trent, do accurate insults. So, interesting. So, as long as it's accurate. So, if you are, in fact, effeminate and soy mentally, Trent, because I'm sure you do work out. You don't seem to be physically weak. I don't know, but it's also mental weakness that I think we're talking about here, and a kind of cowardice when it comes to things like challenges on specific topics like the geopolitics of the papacy, that kind of stuff. Like, then I guess I'm off the hook, right? Because if I make fun of Talbot Swan because he's not actually a bishop any more than Tilda Swinton is a bishop, then my jokes get a free pass, right?
Exposing their sin to lead them to repentance. Jesus didn't just abuse people for his own amusement or for clicks or to get out sinful wrath and anger. However, some terminally online people will say you can be a good Christian and still go scorched earth on your opponents because Jesus whipped the money changers in the temple. But the Bible doesn't say Jesus whipped anyone. John 2:14-15 says, "In the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers at their business. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all, with the sheep and oxen, out of the temple. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables." Jesus is described as overturning the tables after the money changers left the temple, not throwing tables on top of them. And the clause, "he drove them all with the sheep and oxen out of the temple," isn't the best translation of this passage. That's because...
So essentially, Jesus formed a whip that he didn't use. I mean, this is the absurdity of this weird twisting of the text. Like, so he formed a whip, drove them out, and just held the whip. Like, obviously it's saying that he drove them out with the whip. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous.
Because the common Greek words for with are not in this part of the passage. The passage literally says, "And having made a whip of cords, all he drove out from the temple, both sheep and oxen."
This is so stupid, man. These people are like, I've noticed too, Trent is going back even to the original debate, what Trent does is creative explanation. When there's a problem or a challenge, Trent goes to immediately concocting a way to make it work, which is why he would have said, if you remember to the original challenge about the death penalty, there's 3 different ways you could make this work. What? Why do we need 3 different ways to make what your system claims gives us certitude about faith and morals? And the death penalty is obviously a very pertinent issue of morals and ethics. Why would we need 3 different ways to make it work to interpret the death penalty contradiction in the Roman Catholic system? Well, in this system, casuistry is what gets you to the top. In other words, the best people at making it work, coming up with creative new terms, neologisms, ideas, just like scholasticism is all about, and a lot of Roman Catholic absurdities, especially if you get into Saint Alphonsus Liguori, and for example, his many clarifications on when and how you can lie with righteous deception. Now, I don't even have a problem with, there are some biblical examples of righteous deception, but the problem is that you can take that and make it a Pandora's box, as did happen in many Catholic instances in Roman Catholic history, with assassinations, which he said we shouldn't assassinate. Are you sure about that? Because your own Vatican had standing armies in the past. So I'm pretty sure the standing armies engaged in assassinating people, Trent Horn. So does that mean that the Vatican violated fundamental moral teachings when it had standing armies and assassinated people? And doesn't everyone know that during the Counter-Reformation, there were Catholic assassins? I'm sure Trent Horn would say, that happened, we're not justifying it. Wait a minute. It happened at the Vatican, though, with standing armies. So it's not a question of did they do it and is it justified? It's a question of why was the Vatican's moral teaching when they had standing armies or in the Crusades that you could die in the crusade for the papacy, a moral teaching that has now changed? That's the argument, you liar.
And of the money changers, he poured out the coins and the tables he overthrew. Before the Council of Nicaea, only Origen commented on this verse, and he said the whipping was a spiritual lesson, not an historical event.
Of course, he would go to the gayest commentator who castrated himself. Perfect exegesis for Trent Horn. Himself also presumably castrated.
Because if Jesus really did whip people, it would reveal a reckless, lawless spirit incompatible with Christ's virtue. Argued in the Journal of Biblical Literature that the Greek grammar of John 2.
So now he's going into papers on did Jesus act with Trent? Are you? Well, actually, he's not. Trent's not even aware that it's Jesus that's going before the Israelites into battle. Exodus 23. Because Trent is a heretic and doesn't realize that the Old Testament teaches the Trinity, which he explicitly denied in our debate. The angel of the Lord is the person of the Son. The angel of the Lord accompanies them on their journeys and their battles in the Old Testament. So he doesn't even realize the Old Testament teaches Jesus went into battle. And he's concerned with making John 2 through a bunch of random ass papers not say that Jesus formed a court. Okay, well, it doesn't even matter because he went into freaking battle. You idiot.
15 refers to Jesus using a whip to make the cattle leave, not the people. This conclusion is also reached in the article Violence, Nonviolence, and the Temple Incident in John 2:13 through 15, which notes that verse 16 reveals Jesus didn't recklessly overturn tables, but was measured to not harm the caged doves.
Okay. So I'm confused. Does he think that Christianity is pacifist? I'm absolutely confused here because, fundamental Old Testament theology that understands that Jesus is the angel of the Lord, clear as day. This is why he, again, by the way, you understand, you guys, he's tripled down to still say that the term triad is an anti-Trinitarian term. He still says this. Again, as a Eastern Catholic liturgy attendee, Trent, where his own Eastern liturgy uses the word triad for the Trinity, he still triples, quadruples down that it's an Arian anti-Trinitarian term. This is so stupid. It should end his career. And all of you ignorant Roman Catholics who don't even know this still push his nonsense. This is devastating to his whole biblical theology. The Old Testament angel of the Lord, as we have shown in countless debates with the Muslims, is Jesus. Clear as day. Even his own crazy Roman Catholic apologist, Sam Shamoun, has banked his career last 20 years on that, debating the Muslims. But why would we think Trent would understand that when he literally quadruples down that Muslims and Christians worship the same God? The very idiotic position of Trent Doherty and Vatican II. This is the root of the problem. Trent is a heretic, and heretics are the worst moral offenders because the heretic prefers his own beliefs and decisions and opinions to divine revelation. That's the greater sin than the F word or even touching butts. Heresy in Christian theology and classic patristic morals is a worse sin than sodomy. You, as a heresiarch, are destroying souls. Sodomy destroys butts and bodies in one or two souls. Heresy destroys many people's souls. And Trent Horn is a heretic. He is absolutely heterodox. Why do I say that? Just to be mean? No, because after multiple corrections on fundamental terms, including that the word triad is used in his own liturgy for the Trinity, he has quadrupled down that it is not an orthodox term and it's heterodox. This is mind-blowing to me. He doesn't even know the Greek term for Trinity. And he's a Catholic apologist. But he also doesn't know the doctrine of the Trinity as a Catholic apologist, as none of the Catholic apologists actually do, because they teach heterodoxy. So, apart from all the moral posturing and all the smoke and mirrors and the whining and the crying and the effeminacy, the root is not loving and caring about what's true first and foremost. That is the root problem of all this. And other factors might be the reasons why he wouldn't do that. Namely, the effeminacy, the cowardice, the intentional deceiving and doubling, quadrupling, sextupling down on obvious mistakes. Again, all of this would have probably gone in a much better direction if 3 years ago, Trent Horn had simply said, you know what, Jay, you're actually correct. Triad is a basic theological term for the Trinity. You know what, Jay, you're actually correct. The church fathers, from Justin Martyr debating Trifo all the way to St. Maximus, explicitly teach that the Old Testament God is the Trinity, and that the Old Testament saints loved, worshiped, and knew the Trinity. As St. Maximus explicitly says about Abraham. Abraham worshiped the Triad. Trent explicitly says he did not. That is the root of the problem, heresy. So this has led to a person idolizing this institution sunken cost fallacy that he's wrapped up in, causing him then to adopt multiple prelest delusion layers when the root of it is cowardice and inability to admit that you got something wrong. If he could go back and admit error, but you notice Trent has never admitted that he's ever gotten anything wrong. Now, maybe at some point in a video he has. I don't watch Trent Horn content except when we reply when he talks about us. So I don't know if there's some place where he says, oh yes, you know what, this theological thing I was totally wrong about and I have been corrected. Trent is unable to receive correction. And in Proverbs, a person who sextuples down, unable to receive any correction, is a fool. And Trent has been made a fool, theologically speaking, and even by his own actions and his own standards and tests of masculinity and morality and what's appropriate in terms of jokes, he's refuted himself. Here it says, I send my angel before you. The angel will go before you to bring in Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, and Hivites. This is the same angel that pardons sins. Do created angelic beings have the authority and the ability to pardon sins? No, only God can forgive sins, as Jesus says to the Pharisees. So that means that the angel of the Lord here is Jesus. He's divine. That refutes Trent's heresy about the Old Testament. And it's Jesus going into battle to fight the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and Canaanites. Now, Trent probably doesn't even know that. I bet you he wasn't even aware that Exodus 23 says this, because he's stuck defending a pacifist Jesus from John 2 with the whip and the cords. What does that even matter if he went into battle against the Canaanites? This is so preposterous. This is so insane. I can't believe that we're even having to argue this point. And this is why I've constantly harped on the fact that Trent Horn is absolutely low tier. He's super low tier. And again, what's the worst enemy of these people is themselves. Trent could have made a lot of progress understanding the theology at a lot deeper level, a more sophisticated level, especially with the Trinity. But did he choose to do that? He chose to quadruple down. He chose to not look at any of the books that I've recommended or suggested to him, including Eastern Church Fathers and their theology. Because had he looked at even the basics, what is Palamos's book called? The Triads. He doesn't even know that Palamos's book was called. I showed him this. He still says it's an anti-Trinitarian term. This is insane to me. It's like right there in your face, you're wrong on a very obvious basic point, and he has quadrupled and sextupled down. That is the problem. The pride, the inability to admit even a single mistake. That is narcissistic pride.
Which he ordered to be taken away. Jesus also didn't hurt the cattle because a makeshift rope would have simply gotten them to move, and the animals' movement would have caused the money changers to follow them out of the temple.
The animals, this is so retarded, dude. This is ridiculous. Okay, now here we go. Uh-oh.
They're all trying to get kind of ideologically capture these different audience segments. So he sent out to capture Ned Flanders, and Ned Flanders is exactly what he captured.
So can we?
And that's accurate, right? I mean, Trent did capture the absolute normie tier numbers audience. But again, there's a problem with the numbers normie tier stuff. They're also very fickle and they're also very bad, right? So would you rather have, by the way, Trent cited Joel Berry saying that, like Gideon, it's better to have 300 committed people than a zillion lukewarm idiots who don't care or aren't committed. So why would Trent then turn around and be like, well, I guess I want the biggest number, and thus I will be an ecumenist apologist as I'm a Vatican stooge, cover-up artist, but don't call me Ned Flanders, even though that's what I am.
Settle on 7 for charisma?
I think 7's fine.
All right. He is a very intelligent guy. He's very academic, very well read. I think he's very intelligent. I'd say
he's not actually academic and that well read, though, because if you watch our debate on natural theology, that actually gets shown to be the case.
A 9, and then he engages in all sorts of really high level debates and always holds his own. I'd give him a 9 for debate as well.
See, I give him a 10 on both.
First, The Simpsons has really betrayed Ned Flanders because in the first seasons, Ned was just a good...
Oh my gosh, is he actually going to go into defending Ned? This is so gay, dude. And by the way, he left out the part that they put me above Trent, which I think probably made him mad.
Tirade. Finally,
and now he's going to put the book public. I don't care about your book, dude.
We should be careful of this instinct. Christians who agree on major moral issues should stand up for one another, and we should see ourselves as being on the same team. But that
would that include the 3 various ways to make the death penalty contradiction work? Like, what's the Christian position on that one?
Doesn't mean we should give each other a free pass so we can always win. It's fair to point out how a fellow Christian is using an ineffective method, a bad method, or even an evil method to try to accomplish some good end. And we can, as Christians, point that out without our disagreement becoming an attack on the other person.
I mean, who actually wanted to go into defending the Ned Flanders thing was a joke, and Trent actually went into defending who Ned Flanders is in The Simpsons. This is so retarded. Like, I guess that's why the Bishop Tilda Swinton thing didn't resonate with him, because when I said this to him yesterday, he said, I didn't critique you for calling him a fake bishop. I critiqued you for calling him Tilda Swinton. Did you not get the joke? Dude, you're such a nerd.
Invites a vicious counterattack. One way to do that is to privately reach out to the person we disagree with, or ask...
Really? When have you ever done that? Never. I've never had a private message from Trent Horn about any disagreement other than setting up our initial debate. Trent does not follow his own advice, and I'm sure that he would say, you are too morally reprehensible for me to ever reach out and touch you or to talk to you. Reach out and touch someone.
The person to review our public criticism of him, as I did with Andrew for this episode. Brian Holdsworth was a great model of this recently when instead of attacking a Catholic woman on TikTok who had a bad take on the liturgy, he privately reached out to her and then critiqued her position without publicly identifying her.
Well, let's see if Trent actually follows this advice. Okay. So, again, you heard him say right there, the appropriate moral stance is to reach out when there's a private, personal disagreement. Let's look at the last emails that I have from Trent Horn, who obviously has had big issues with me over the last several years. Let's take a look at this because Trent is actually showing that he's deceptive and doesn't follow these policies. These are public consumption policies that he has absolutely no interest in actually following. This is for you to think and to see performative piety when in fact, Trent Horn's easily accessible emails to me, which clearly came through easily in 2021 up to 2023, include no new email until 2022 to 2023. So Trent Horn does not follow this advice, as you can see. thorn@catholic.com. No emails from Trent Horn about any personal issues, personal private disagreements, nothing whatsoever. And by the way, he could have also DM'd me on Twitter because I blocked him yesterday, but he was never blocked prior to that, as far as I recall. So he could have also messaged me on Twitter or any other social media outlet, which it's easy to actually get in contact with me. Did he do any of that? Absolutely not. Nothing since 2023, if that is even a Trent thing. That might have just included him in a CC or whatever. At least as far as I'm sure, 2022 appears to be the last. So 4 years since any personal reaching out on the part of Trent Horn, showing that he doesn't even follow this bullshit policy that he moralizes over. So this is public performative moralizing. And as I've told you with these Roman Catholics all the time, they are a totally different person on the back side of things. Dealing with them on the public internet, they're the nice guys. Dealing with them on the back end of things, they are absolute, generally speaking, snakes. Now, there's some exceptions. Tim Gordon has never done me wrong. Tim Gordon has never lied to me, never done anything deceptive, always been, even in heated disagreements, very heated disagreements in our debates, we were still able to go out and eat dinner, still able to have good conversations. But the nice guys, Ziocon version of Catholic apologetics unilaterally decided that I was a bad person, as well as Nick Fuentes, as well as Tim Gordon, apparently, as well as Joe Enders, as well as all the other people that they have in their little elite circle. And what do we see with his BFF, Matt Fradd? Oh, sold out to the Israeli Wire, the Daily Wire. Interesting patterns there.
In contrast, Timothy Gordon and Joe Enders recently critiqued my colleague Joe Heschmeyer and accused him of incompetently missing or deliberately hiding a papal quote that they claimed refuted his position on biblical headship in marriage.
I don't know if you're a poor researcher. I hope in all hopes, let me just put it that way, that Joe Heschmeyer is this bad of a researcher, because I'm citing the same paragraph that you cited for the right reason comment, the one that you took out of context.
But in Joe's response to them, he noted that he did include the full quote in his original episode and showed clips of Gordon admitting he didn't even watch Joe's entire 12-minute episode before launching into an hour-long critique of it.
Is there a better file, or is it this the only one?
I think that's the only one. We would have to find it there.
Because I think there's a longer clip of him talking about it somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a whole video.
There's a whole video, but it's 12 minutes. And then he spends most of his time mocking the South Pole, the feminist answer that I guess Even Catholic Answers has decided to repudiate.
I want you to notice the two things Tim says there. First, he's intentionally choosing not to engage with the actual argument I'm making. He's just going to engage with the sound.
By the way, Joel Heschmeyer, if you'll remember, will not debate me and backed out of debating Alex Soren, another fraidy cat coward.
Bite from it somebody put up on Twitter. And second, he's perfectly aware that the actual argument argues against a feminist rejection of male headship. So he knows all that, but how does he title his video? Catholic Answers Says Feminism Okay. Now, does that...
All right. Anyway, this is their inter-Catholic dispute. Let's get on over here quickly to get to Trent's cope about Epstein and the Vatican. I'm looking forward to this because I want to see the creative explanations and casuistry, and perhaps Trent will give us 4 or 5 options as to how we can creatively explain the relationship, or perhaps I'm sure there's no relationship and this is all conspiracy nonsense. But remember, this is a normie who still denies that there's any push for globalization or a new world order. He's quadrupled down on this, which tells you right away he's a fraud. He pushes the establishment positions on everything back to stabbies, masks, all of that. I'm still a bad person because I was right about all that, but I'm still bad, even though Trent can't admit that he's ever got anything wrong. That's the root of this issue. So let's listen to why Jeff Stein McEffrey in the Vatican is a nothing burger, apparently.
Long been the targets of lurid conspiracy theories. And in today's episode, we're going to refute 3 of the silliest ones.
Oh, it's lurid conspiracy theories. Interesting.
With a recent conspiracy that's been shared on social media. Number 1, the Pope John Paul II, Jeffrey Epstein connection. In the wake of the recent release of material from the Epstein files, some people claim Pope St. John Paul II was involved in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking and cite this picture as evidence. This ex-user writes, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell being personally blessed by the Pope. Interesting. But a raised eyebrow does not an argument make. The Pope blesses thousands of people every year, and he doesn't do a background check on each of them beforehand. Other people pointed to this email from...
Excuse me. That is not the extent of this argument. Now, he chose apparently a idiotic, retarded conspiracy outlet that doesn't do much fact checking and just kind of puts out the salacious headlines. But the argument was that one of the emails from an associate of Epstein I hate that the freaking bookmark search just doesn't even work, man. It's so annoying. We're going to show you what it actually says. You might not be able to read that. Let's see if I can find a bigger version of it. By the way, I'm going to bet you money. I haven't seen this video yet. I'll bet you money he doesn't even mention the Vatican Bank email, because that shows an intimate knowledge of something that also points to knowledge and relationship of John Paul II. So, by the way, here's a discussion between Bannon and Epstein about, quote, infiltrating the Vatican. So this tells us that there was a discussion about attempting to get in, make friends, make connections. Steve is working for the, quote, purification of the church. This is some Virza woman or person talking to Epstein, talking about praying for the Pope. I don't think Epstein cares about your prayers for the Pope, but Epstein says prawn, and then Bannon says we will take down Francis, the Clintons, Z, and Francis, and then Epstein says Itkov, I don't know what that is, and then Bannon says in the closet of the Vatican, which, as of course, if you may or may not know, but Bannon over the last several years made it a point to try to get closer and closer to a lot of cardinals and prelates. Now let's look at this email, what it actually says. It says that this is an associate who comes up quite often in the emails, Richard Kahn, and it talks about in the past. Okay, so this email is from 2015, and it says in the past, Jeff Stein McEffrey, and let me make it big for you guys. That's what she said. In the past, Jeffrey spent time at the Vatican, quote, living at it with John Paul II, discussing architectural things like columns, because they had a shared interest in architecture. So this is a 2015 email discussing the past, meaning that it's not just a blessing, but it fits with the time frame of this circa 2003 blessing. So yes, this is obviously a public meeting and blessing, but it's the same time frame that the email is reflecting back and saying they spent time there. There is another email talking about arranging flights for Francis, Pope Francis. Let me see it, because I saved all these. I just had to find them. Here we see. I'm trying to organize a trip for Francis to the Middle East. Why is he organizing a trip for Pope Francis, first of all, to the Middle East? So there's another email about Epstein, or excuse me, an admission that Epstein donated significant money to Catholic charities. And Roman Catholics are lying when they say there's no connection between Catholic charities and the Catholic Church. There absolutely is. It's a total lie. In fact, the U.S. Conference for Catholic Bishops have publicly stated that they support the opposition to ICE and the bringing in of all manner of undocumented immigrants because, quote, no one is an illegal. That's what they say. So let's scroll down, and I'm going to show you that and the statement about Epstein saying, I was also gifted architectural works from John Paul II. That also reconfirms the likelihood that the earlier emails and story about living at the Vatican discussing architecture are very likely true. Now you can look this up. We've already done it. Cleve did a whole stream on this. You can scroll back and find this as well. It's everywhere, by the way, online, all over Twitter. It's taking me a minute to find it because there's so much stuff that's been coming out. Let's see. I apologize for not having this pulled up because I didn't really know where Trent was going to go in this discussion, but we're going to debunk the easy stuff first and see if he has anything substantial going on. By the way, how come Trent isn't talking about Epstein funding all kinds of crazy stuff? Does he? We'll see. Maybe he will. Maybe we can give Trent the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he'll talk about it. I don't expect it to happen, though. Oh, here we go. Jeffrey, all went well. Any chance that you could arrange for us to meet the Pope? This is 2015. Why are people asking Jeffrey Epstein to arrange a meeting with the Pope if there's no connection and Epstein doesn't have the ability to meet with the Pope or set these kinds of things up? So that's another, I forgot that one actually. Yes, this is LifeSite. Jeffrey Epstein donated critical funds to Catholic charities of the Virgin Islands. Oh, interesting. And as Cleve points out, where are the Virgin Islands? Oh, they're right next to Little St. James. No, but remember, there's nothing here, nothing to see. This is all nothing. Now, why would we think that the Roman Catholic Church might have a hand in this, or that Catholic charities might be connected to the Roman Catholic Church and the hierarchy? Well, how about the bishops saying that they support this whole methodology? Cardinal Kupit and Cardinal Tobin say, reject ICE, stand with Minnesota. This is your organized crime cult church working to destroy by open illegal activities and actions. This is illegal to support the importation of massive third worlders who are not legal people. This is a crime. These people are public criminals. They're organized crime criminal goblins, and Trent Horn is their apologist. That's why I said he is trash, because he is. He is a trash person supporting these trash. He's the defender of these trash. Now, this is another Catholic website. This is an FBI crisis report, and it notes that Epstein had talked about, and again, this may be false, but it's just another piece of corroborating evidence. It says Epstein talked about the ceiling that he had, which had been donated to him by the Pope. And this is presumably back in 2004. Epstein claimed that the 2004 ceiling in his elevator at his New York mansion was gifted by the Pope. Now, what is the commonality here with John Paul II? Well, architecture. And so while this may not be true, or perhaps Epstein made this up or was trying to sound cool, it does vibe with the earlier statement in the other email that he was very interested in talking architectural oddities with John Paul II. So it does make sense that he would be gifted something like that. So let's see where Trent takes it.
One of Epstein's assistants or associates saying that Epstein lived at the Vatican with Pope John Paul II, implying that the Pope knew about Epstein's activities. Now, first, people have lived with even serial killers and not even known what they were doing. So it's not surprising if some bad people lived at Vatican City and the Pope never knew about what they were doing. But the evidence that Epstein himself lived at the Vatican is as flimsy as the evidence that Epstein unalived himself. In the email from 2015, 10 years after John Paul II died, some kind of contractor says he's trying to paint columns in different styles for Epstein and writes the following. He wants me to finish each column different, as when he was living with Pope John Paul II in Vatican. He looked at a variety of different columns captured in wars. He told me that every Pope demanded to have a column from every conquered country. So there's a collection of different columns in Vatican. But there is no collection of columns that the Pope acquired after conquering different territories. So this is probably just a jumbled recollection of something a Roman tour guide told Epstein when he was in Rome in 2003 when John Paul II blessed him. And then he told this restoration specialist about it 10 years later. Now, John Paul II does...
Now, remember, the Vatican has its own security service. And this is admitted, this is well known. There's a Vatican Secret Service. And to get close to the Pope requires some degree of background check. I don't think that's controversial. And you can verify that. That shouldn't be that controversial. But according to Trent, no, they're actually just kind of hanging out there up there with the Pope without any security or check. But how does that jibe when you think about the fact that this is not the only international PDF criminal who was close to the Pope and even was given a prestigious honor of a papal knighthood. Papal knighthood is a prestigious honor bestowed by the Pope, as that of the Catholic Church, for outstanding service to the church, society, or charitable acts. And who got that from John Paul II? Again, another notorious person covering up PDF stuff. Jimmy Savile, the infamous necrophiliac, Satanist, procurer, trafficker, disgraced broadcaster, given the papal knighthood by John Paul II. Now, again, Trent would have you believe that, maybe they just hand these out. Like they're just like candy, right? They're giving these out at the Vatican. If you go, you're a pilgrim and I've been to the Vatican, you kind of walk through in that line and they're just kind of handing out, they're tossing out papal knighthoods. Did they do a background check on this demon, Trent? Or perhaps the Vatican Security Service was absolutely just asleep at the wheel that day. They didn't do a background check on Jimmy Savile, and they just accidentally gave him a papal knighthood, one of the worst satanic criminals in modern history. Did Trent even know this? Does he even talk about this? And by the way, they've said they cannot reverse this. They will not reverse the papal knighthood to this monster. Papal honor cannot be removed. Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter if you're an actual demon, PDF trafficking goblin. You can't lose that papal prerogative and that special gift. I wonder if Trent's going to mention Jimmy Savile and his very close connection to John Paul II, the supposed saint, the PDF cover-up artist of the Roman Catholic Church.
Share some blame for the clergy abuse crisis and McCarrick scandal. Part of this was due to the Pope having endured the Soviet occupation of Poland, where communists would use slander and lies to target people. So if someone like McCarrick denied allegations against him, John Paul II was more likely to imprudently believe these denials. But if you think a literal saint was actively involved in the sexual abuse of minors because there is a picture of him meeting one of the perpetrators at a public ceremony, then you need to log off the internet and go see Jesus at church for a hard reset.
Trent, it's not just that there's a connection to Epstein, it's the other emails talking about the close connection that Epstein has to the Vatican, including arranging flights and meetings for Francis. So you cleverly left all of that out of your COPE session here. And you made no mention of other notorious PDFs who clearly have a deep connection to John Paul II. And notice his argument. If you think that a saint would do this, you're crazy. Well, maybe he's not a saint. Maybe the system that you are worshiping is actually a lie. That's the point. If we're correct, we can make sense of this data. John Paul II is part of this international clique pushing what kind of stuff? I wonder if there's any other indicators that might suggest John Paul II has another agenda, such as praying in the synagogues and the mosques. Like the Darcy O'Brien book talks about. Now, I'm going to go into a domain that Tim Gordon and Ned Flanders have no knowledge of, and will probably absolutely not talk about, and that's the Mossad. And why would I talk about that? Well, obviously, anybody who's had scratching surface level analysis of what's going on with the Vatican and Epstein and all of that would know that clearly Epstein has that layer of connection. But what hardly anybody has any knowledge of, and the only book I've actually seen discussing it at a serious level, is the journalist and historian, intelligence writer, Gordon Thomas. Now, Gordon Thomas is, you could say, well, he's a journalist, but he's a conspiracy theorist. Well, fine, whatever. But his books are mainline journalism. They've been New York Times bestseller type books, right? So we're not talking about, vigilanttcitizen.com book here. We're talking about mainline, accurate 1999 Gideon's Spies. I read this, most of this book many years ago, and then kind of got back into it because I started thinking, wait a minute, actually, well, a lot of what's going on with John Paul II and the relationship to the Jews seems to tie into what Gideon's Spies writes about, because there's actually a couple chapters about John Paul II and Israel, and particularly the Mossad. Guess what? All of the information in Gideon's Spies vibes perfectly with what we've seen in the Epstein files. Now, it's under John Paul II that the nation state of Israel achieves official recognition by the Vatican. Why is that? Well, according to Gideon Thomas, it's because Mossad was not just bugging or trying to bug the Vatican. They were actively operating and working to infiltrate and work inside the Vatican and get mole spies, etc. Interesting. Who in this same time frame, although maybe not in the 1980s or 90s, but who in the late 90s is making connections with the Vatican for the Mossad? Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. Now, do you think Trent Horn has any knowledge of this subject? Do you think he will ever even glance at a book like this? Absolutely not. So this is where these frauds, hucksters, and cover-up shills will never go, even though this isn't even a conspiracy book. It's a mainline journalist, geopolitical analyst text, Gideon's Spies. And you can go just look up, if you are lazy and you can't read, just look up the summary of the AI summary, something like that, of the chapters and the sections on John Paul II's relationship to the Mossad and to the recognition of Israel.
Argument. Attacking her isn't even an ad. 2. Jack Chick's Fanatic Fever Dreams. Jack Chick was a fundamentalist Baptist cartoonist whose tracks are probably the most widely...
Now, this was Trent's original joke about me. He thought it was really funny to say that my take on everything was Jack Chick. Jay Dyer's the new Jack Chick. That was like his first joke. Not even that good of a joke, but that didn't really bother me. We had our debate. I didn't care about that stupid joke. But I want you guys to notice that what we've done on this channel, and I think people are beginning to recognize this and figure it out, is we started a series 10 years ago. That wasn't my first foray into this topic, but it was my first idea to do a series. starting with the writings of the power elite themselves. What do they admit in their books? And we called it the Global Elite Book Series. We began with Tragedy and Hope, which is a 1,300 page book written by Dr. Carol Quigley, a Council on Foreign Relations archivist and historian, military historian, and who was the mentor to Bill Clinton. So a very important figure, not the top of the pyramid, but an apologist and a historian for our Western globalist elite. That was the beginning of the Global Elite series. Since that time, 10 years ago, we branched out into reading dozens of global elite texts, which admit and prove everything that we talk about, including Changing Images of Man, including Zbigniew Brzezinski's books, including David Rockefeller's memoirs and books, including Jacques Attalie's books, including H.G. Wells's books, including Bertrand Russell's books, including hosts of other Fabian socialist, geopolitical analysts, top-level elites, Joseph Nye, Soft Power, Halford McKinder, Heartland Rimland theory stuff, on and on and on, to explain ad nauseum with absolute spurgitude, exactitude, that everything we're saying is documented and real. I don't talk about aliens. I don't believe in fringe, retarded, Tartarius stuff. I only focus on what I can prove to you from the books, because I was impressed when Alex Jones did that years ago. Alex would always say, this is in this book, this is in that book. And when I first heard him say that, I was skeptical. I thought, they don't admit all that. That's too crazy. No, they do. Absolutely, they do. In fact, it's not just those big policy books. It's also white papers. We've read extensive white papers. We've read hundreds of pages of text on DARPA and the RAND Corporation. Who else has done that? Now, you've got Burmis. Yes. You've got Richard Grove. Yes. You've got Corbett. They've done some stuff like that. Yes. I'm not saying nobody else did that. Whitney Webb's done some of that. Sure. But who else in the theology sphere has done that? Nobody. No one. Everything we talk about has some global elite text you can go look up. That's what's so annoying and frustrating to me about people like Trent Horn, who are intelligent people. Trent's not a stupid person. That's not the problem. But it wouldn't take you very long, even if you don't have the time to read all of these, which I actually did. You could go listen to my talks. Look, here's a talk on Jacques Attalie's book from the 1990s about the New World Order. Who is Jacques Attali? See, you don't even know who these people are. What about Miles Copeland, famous CIA operative? Wrote a whole book on how the CIA does everything in other countries, Game of Nations. I lectured on that 10 years ago. What about the history of the British Empire and opium? Oh, we've lectured on that too. What about Manly P. Hall? Hey, what about actually talking to top military operators and Trump's choice for Director of National Intelligence, Colonel McGregor, who basically vindicated my analysis of things? So wait a minute. I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I'm actually talking to the guy that Trump wanted to be the Director of National Intelligence the first term. How would I do that if I'm a retarded idiot? If I don't actually read the books? Julian Huxley, Philosophy of UNESCO, Terence McKenna's Psychonaut Works, Secret Dialectic Turning Point by Friedhof Capra, Anglo-American Establishment, 2 talks right there. History of the OSS, right there. History of Sexpionage, right there. Brave New World. On and on and on. More H.G. Wells books, Brzezinski's books, Histories of the CIA, Arthur Kessler's texts. I've read multiple Arthur Kessler books. We've lectured through them. These people don't read any of this stuff. They have no knowledge of this, but they tell you that there is no global conspiracy. They're liars. Has Trent ever talked about the Frankfurt School? I studied under a person for the Frankfurt School. I've lectured on Frankfurt School books. On and on and on. Anyway, there's a whole series right there for you. All right, guys, we're going to be with Tristan very soon. So let's see if we can get through Trent really quick here.
published comic series in the world. He's published over 1 billion of these little things in over 100 languages. And all of them basically say that if you don't accept Chick's particular theology, then giant faceless Jesus will send you to hell. His most famous anti-Catholic tracts include the tastefully titled Death Cookie about the Eucharist, Why is Mary Crying, and Are Catholics Christians, where Chick claims Catholics are automatically citizens of the Holy See, which would be awesome because if you have a Vatican passport, you can visit over 150 countries without needing a visa. Of course, that's not true, and these passports are only granted to people like cardinals who reside in Vatican City and other diplomats. But the Chick
Oh, interesting. That again seems to suggest a unique intelligence agency connection there with the Vatican, which again, I bet you Trent doesn't know anything about that.
conspiracies about Catholicism get even more ridiculous. In the 1980 discontinued tract, My Name in the Vatican, Chick claims that
Hey, wait a minute. These conspiracies are ridiculous. Then Trent, it should be pretty easy for you to actually come and debate this topic, which you've declined 3 times. So let's remember what Trent said to my challenge here. These subject matters, I don't deal with this. I only dabble in this. It's not my area of research. Debate this with Tim Gordon. I only debate the papacy. Okay, but you just said that these types of crazy conspiracy theories about the Vatican, they're so preposterous. Well, shouldn't they be easy to refute? If they're ridiculous, then it should be an easy knockdown. Okay, well, hey, look, you could totally put an end to Jay Dyer, right? Or you could totally discredit Dyer on these crazy conspiracies. All you got to do is just come bring the Vatican heat with this Jack Chick level stuff. But then when actually challenged on that subject matter, which you just said is ridiculous, I don't do that. It's out of my wheelhouse. Oh, interesting. But it's ridiculous and you could easily refute it.
Name of every Protestant in the world was in the big computer in the Vatican. How did the Vatican get the name of, at the time, 500 million Protestants around the world, many of whom...
All right, well, this is Jack Chick stuff. This is retarded. We're going to skip all this. Let's see. Let's move on to something else. And then, guys, remember, we're going to be live with Tristan right after this. We're going to transition immediately into me and beautiful Tristana Z-Self will be joining me to cover the toxic culture, the Epstein revelations. Where are we at? Tristan's vacation, shall we say. I think it was... went to Little St. James or somewhere in the last year or so. Just kidding. Tristan's retirement and then early unretirement, like Cher, like a true diva, coming back out of retirement to do a live stream here in a moment.
From churches that no one's even heard of. Who knows? And the tract also says the Inquisition is alive and well after killing 68 million people throughout history for heresy, which is a higher death.
I mean, Trent, who actually takes the Chick tract seriously? I mean, I guess this is directed at like low tier fundamentalists. So I thought this was going to be about Epstein. Like there was like 2 minutes passing over that. So let's skip ahead, see if there's something else here. The nun secret thing. I remember that's fake. That's stupid. Let's see what this is.
And number 3, silly Seventh-day Adventist conspiracies.
Oh, this wasn't even about Epstein. So he had one little cope, 2-minute thing, not even addressing the real emails and the overall issue with, again, him talking about the architectural commonalities, the planning the flights for Pope Francis, people asking him to set up meetings with Pope Francis. Then we had the situation of Catholic Charities getting Epstein money in a critical amount, quote unquote. We had the Savile scandal, which they overlook and ignore as if there's not other creeps like Savile connected to all this. So we'll stop with the Trent stuff there. Again, we may have more stuff in the future. Again, you should go read about Jimmy Savile. He's definitely a great holy man for sure. Definitely proves the case for John Paul II's sanctity, awarding one of the worst people alive at that time with a special papal honor. I'm going to have to immediately, though, kind of transition out, you guys, to Tristan. John, did you have a comment before we go and start read the super chats? Then we'll move on over to beautiful Tristana with us.
I've been listening the whole time, but the thing that bothered me earlier, even before all of this that you said shit, and that totally
yeah, I mean, giant child raping criminal international gangs. Dude, who said the F word and the S word? Right.
That's right. Also, I am looking forward to hearing you and Tristan talk together because I am a big fan of Tristan. I know you know this.
Yeah, is it Tristana? Well, it's Tristana, and he Z identifies as himself now. So just get that correct.
Well, also, You know what was funny, and I wanted to point this out, is the fake bishop Tilda Swan. He wasn't even as mad as Trent was about you making a comment.
Put some respect on that name.
He like this whole thing got blown up, and then that dude, like, I mean, at least he was man enough in his Marxist fake bishop, existence. He just let it go after a day. Trent went and dug it up.
Yeah. And by the way, just one of the oddest things to pick as the like moral infraction is weird.
Yeah, and he didn't even pick any moral, quote unquote moral infractions against any fellow Roman Catholics. He picked one against a Pentecostal liberation theology preacher.
No, the last one was Tim Gordon, so he did critique Tim.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, the last one, the last couple of minutes is Tim Gordon.
Oh, I didn't hear that part, but yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, yeah, appreciate that comment, John. That's funny. So let me read these really quick. Brandon Lee, $20. I haven't looked for any videos of yours. If you do you have any funny paranormal stories? We did do a couple paranormal streams. You just have to search the archives for the live streams on that. Thank you, Brandon Lee. Josiah Illiron, $20. I've been meaning to ask you, Jay, do the Georgia Guidestones have anything to do with Epstein? Who destroyed them? Well, I don't know who destroyed them, but I mean, a lot of people think that it was funded and put up by Ted Turner. And Ted Turner shares the same eugenics worldview of Epstein, because Epstein had that email, I think, with Bill Gates or something, where they're talking about how can we get rid of all the poor people. So yeah, that's the Depop eugenics worldview. Reginald Dankins, $5. This world looking Morrowind. It's ashy as hell. The Vatican ashy as hell. Vatican play too much. Maybe play too much. Gorilla Biscuits, what's up? 40 Crush, $5. Pokemon Go had a location at Epstein's Island. It was a sun clock, and it was removed. Interesting. I don't know anything about that. Agrotech, $20. I grew up as a non-denominational Baptist, but I've been agnostic for 15 years. My values align with Christianity, but I don't know how to reconcile the supernatural. Do you have suggestions or advice? I'm not sure what you mean by reconcile the supernatural. Do you mean you struggle with that being the case? I mean, I would look into starting with our, tag presuppositional kind of argumentation, because really that question revolves around presuppositional worldview questions about what's possible and not possible, and our assumptions about our worldview dictate how we're going to interpret what's possible and not possible. So look into the tag talks that we've done. Reginald, what's up? Emilion, what's up, dog? $20. Support J Diary says, thank you so much. Cast it Tempo, $10. Pretty much new to this topic. I've never met actual Catholics. Really? What do you mean? All I see in my country is occulty. So you must be in like Latin South America. This kind of content. The Jeffrey Epstein podcasts have been great. At one point, he says he wishes that he was a disease. Oh, I don't know. He said that. I think Prince, or what's his name? The royal Prince Philip is famous for saying that more than once, and I've dug up those quotes and clips. They're real. So, but I didn't know Jeff Stein said that. Heart of Personal Story, what's up? Thank you for that. Let's Talk God, $5. Rome gave up the military. The Roman Catholic Church gave up its military, the papal Triple Crown, and they gave up the state religion in 1929 Lateran Treaty. By their logic, Roman Catholicism then fell. Exactly. Their own stupid argument about military victories proving or disproving the religion then means that they are no longer the true religion. I guess that would make Islam the true religion then, on their basis. Not understanding how deep this goes, Jeff Stein loved the Vatican so much because he knew it was the real true church. This is the Roman Catholic cope that I see. Yeah, this is a classic Roman Catholic cope, that the more evil that you see within the Roman Catholic Church actually proves it because Satan's targeting it. So by that logic, the more wicked you are, the more saintly you are. In fact, that was an actual line of argument. If you remember, who was the whirlwind, the gay dude? You're caught up in the whirlwind. And everybody called that dude gay. And then all the Roman Catholics were like, how dare you? How dare you? And then it came out he was gay in a big gay scandal. What was that guy's name? Michael something, the whirlwind. And this is always what happens. What are you talking about?
I mean, even the
Michael Voris of the Whirlwind. Go ahead.
I was going to say, even the saints that Orthodoxy wouldn't necessarily agree with would never, ever advocate for Skittles.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think Catherine of Siena would advocate for Skittles?
Of course not. I mean, they were still in an era when they would explicitly say, like Pius V does at Trent, that's liable to death. I've posted this like a million times. President Retard, $20. Tristana was Matthew McConaughey's stunt double in the Dragon movie. Yes, in fact, I was the first one to call that out and spot that years ago. Freezing Entertainment, $5. You see that the Vatican Bank had Morningstar equities. This seems like a Vatican Lucifer ethical investment. I don't know about that, but I mean, I do recall something like Morningstar equities. I think that comes up in the Gladio stuff. But they had a lot of shell corporations and fronts, and the structure of the Vatican D'Ambrosio Bank stuff. It's very similar to a lot of other scandals where they create these cutouts, and it makes it hard to trace where the money's going because it's just a bunch of fake companies and things in Costa Rica and whatnot. Commentator, a commentour, $5. First time watching your stream instead of just listening. I thought you were drinking water, not just doing crazy mouth noises. No, I'm doing Alps. By the way, Alps, I think they follow me, so maybe I'll get an Alps sponsorship now. MEB, $2. Aren't most male feminist creeps? Yes, actually, Jordan Peterson's comment nailed it. He was absolutely spot on there. 7 Martyrs. Jaybird, you're on point with all this. Hyper-feminine Protestant churchmen. Tim Gordon is the only normal Roman Catholic dude that I've met. Anthony from Avoiding Babylon's a cool dude. Joe Enders seems like a cool dude. I don't really know him personally, but we've had good conversations with those guys, even with, vehement disagreements. Fishy Fillmore, $2. Orthos seem to be the only universal principalists. I think you could probably make that argument. The only consistent ones. Eugene, $5. Jay is mean is not an argument. Well, that's the easiest way out, right? Is to say, well, I don't have to associate with that because they're mean. It's also the laziest. Taint Nuffin, $5. Watched your interview with Father Turbo today. It was really great. He always imparts great wisdom. Yeah, I didn't expect that to be so kind of convicting. I went into that thinking, we're going to talk about Epstein, but actually it was all a very convicting spiritual conversation. So shout out to Trister, by the way. Go ahead.
That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, he has a lot of. I think he has a spiritual gift to like convict you, which is pretty interesting. Tristan, by the way, I'm trying to rush through these, so forgive me if it takes a little bit to get started on our stream, but let me finish these super chats here. Amber, $10. I'm not sure if you covered this, but the Vatican recently announced partnership with Morningstar. Okay, that somebody else mentioned this, so maybe I should look into that because I'm not familiar with what that is. Maybe that's not the Gladio stuff. So, and the reason I say Gladio is that I made a list in the Paul Williams book that he lists all the shell front corporations that both the Banco d'Ambrosio and the Vatican Bank were using. It's like 20. So there's all these weird names like this. So, it is. Now you see why both serial killers, conspiracy theorists, and the FBI in movies have giant cork boards with string because it is very difficult to keep up with all this. Like you read Whitney Webb's book, it's like you need the string cork board to draw all the connections because there's a lot of stuff. Vatican launches Catholic stock index. What? To measure ethical investments. Okay, I'm going to have to read into this because I don't even understand what that's supposed to mean. Align your investment portfolio with Catholic teaching. Now, does this mean Catholic teaching when the death penalty was necessary for butt stuff, or is this Catholic teaching nowadays where in Italy you can be a Skittles priest? I'd like to know what exactly the Vatican teaching is that my investments are supposed to line up with. Maybe we could ask Jeff Stein McGeffrey what's a good thing to invest in, since he may actually be alive. And if he is, maybe we could send a couple of emails, ask Steve Bannon to send a couple of emails to Jeff Stein McGeffrey and get some investment advice, because a lot of people were asking Jeffrey about investment advice. So maybe he could consult. Maybe this sounds like actually a Jeff Stein McGeffrey idea right here. He had a lot of crazy, kooky ideas. Journey of Abundance. Father Moses entered the chat. Shout out to Father Moses if he's here. 7 Martyrs. We was the monarchs of the melanin magic. You may be referring to my Candace joke video. Fresh Pelmini, $5. The only masculine vice I support, the only masculine vice that I support is Miami Vice. I like that attitude. Jake Guitar got $20. Your lisp thing got me laughing like a Kang. Talking about Leather Daddy Albrecht. Fishy Fillmore's $5. Orthodoxy seems the most untainted Christianity. Yeah. But did they ever get involved or invaded by the occult or these rings? Well, every church, every organization will have members that get co-opted and get, you had, for example, Soviet bishops installed in the Cold War. A lot of those guys got compromised, sexual compromise, co-opted, all of that. Go watch my interview with Metropolitan Jonah on that, because he talks about the Soviets had like a tier system of not compromisable, maybe compromisable, totally compromised, right, of the various Orthodox clergy in Russia and other, Baltic countries too. So, yeah, that does exist. I mean, Orthodox churches had sex scandals too, but I think it's the difference is that the scope and the gravity is way different. And I'm not excusing the skullduggery that goes on with the EP or any of that. They're also very bad. Good Godfather, $2. I watched PM show. It was funny. What's the PM show? Fishy Fulmer, $10. God's miracles transcend natural law. Do satanic rituals work? I think sometimes they do things. I mean, it's hard to explain or know exactly when, but you say, does dark magic actually work? I think at the least, if you look at, say, Michael Aquino's book on black magic, he says, let's take all this Egyptian sorcery and the principles behind Egyptian sorcery, and let's apply this to military discipline and military, psyops and whatnot. So perhaps in that way, you could say it's verifiable. But really, I think what it works to do is dupe the person doing it, thinking that they're getting powers, and that's the power of the delusion. Cheda, $5. Love you, Jay. Thank you. Emilian, $20. Jay, what's your opinion about Josephus writing about Jesus in Antiquities? I mean, I've cited it as a historical source, and I've cited it as a proof of partial preterism, because he was an eyewitness to the destruction of the temple, which backs up Luke 21 and Matthew 24. But I think Josephus fell into some kind of weird cult attitude and some kind of strange view about some false messiah. I forget exactly what the details were, but so I don't know that he's totally trustworthy, but he is a historical witness, much like Titus or anybody else could be, or Titian or whoever it is. That's the other famous historical references to Jesus. I would class Josephus in that kind of category. Christo, what's up? Gifted memberships. Paul, what's up? $5. Fishy Filmworks, $20. The end times seem near. Is our time better spent pointing out influential heretics or converting atheists or shoring up our family defenses? Well, I'm not worried about the end times, right? And we're not, as Orthodox, supposed to be worried about it. So I don't think there is a priority to, I've got to, debate all the atheists, right? As more people become Orthodox, you got, for example, Jim Bob's doing really good debating all the atheists. He's tearing it up. So you've got people focusing on that. I haven't really focused on the atheists in a while. I've been doing other topics. Mainly got to deal with Bishop Tilda Swinton. So that's the main person we got to take down. Just kidding. Joshua Tree, $10. It boggles my mind the elites have everything, money and power, and they're people who want to be them and they want to be with them. Why do they hurt the young? Do they worship Baal? I mean, I think that amongst the elite, you can have the worship of anything. You worship yourself, Satan, Baal, Moloch, be an atheist. Like, as long as you're willing to do whatever the system says and compromise, you can. That's the only way to go up the chain. Crash Meta Religion, $10. Have you ever tried to debate Jimmy Akin? I'm sure he would not do it. I think I've mentioned him and called him out, but I don't think it's ever been proposed as a debate topic. But how about Jimmy Akin debate me on the geopolitics of the papacy? Because he reaffirmed Trent's position during COOF that there's no such thing as a global Davos elite conspiracy. It doesn't exist. So he promotes the normie crap that Trent does. So he would definitely be a person to debate. So here you go, Jimmy Akin. How about I challenge you to debate the geopolitics of the Vatican and what is a better explanation for the Vatican in the 20th century and its actions, the charism of Peter and indefectibility and infallibility, or the geopolitical power of the Western elites, turning it to be a tool of their propaganda. And that would include, by the way, Gaudium et Spes. Trying to hurry so we can get to the Tristan show here. Thorn Shield, $10. If global power cabal elites were to come out with a official party name, would it be the Fabian Socialists, the Disenfranchising Anglo Party? Well, I think ultimately at the root core of it, they are satanic. And that's why you see, for example, the Jeff Stein McEffrey email about Torturing, the young Christian girl. That's absolute pure Satanism. To defile the youth, which, by the way, Crowley talks about that's like the purest form of Satanism, is to do that. So that to me suggests that Jeff Stein and the people at his sort of steering committee level, and remember, he was recruited into the Trilateral Commission, which is the kind of above steering committee of CFR. He was recruited in that very early. And that to me suggests that there is a definite satanic element and network amongst the people at that level. And they believe that they derive power from harming the most innocent. It's a principle of inversion. So if they had a party name, I mean, ultimately, I think the ideology is, you could say, Fabian Socialists. Because remember, the Fabian Socialists were pushing the same horrible, disgusting art in the 1890s. They were way ahead of these people and pushing the same stuff. But yeah, the satanic socialists. How about that? V. Scott, $5. I'm stoked to finally see you say the Mean Girls gift that I made was the piety signaling henpeckers. And they're all saying, raise your hand if J. Dyer victimized you. Okay, that's funny. Yeah, I saw that, I think, on Twitter is what you're talking about. Good God the Father, $2. The Piers Morgan show was actually confirmed funny. Thank you. I think everybody thought that was funny. Orthodox Boomer, except for Trent Horn looking for something to bitch about. Orthodox Boomer Grandmother, $20. Jay, thank you. You've helped me from my worldview. Geopolitics, theology, and movie symbolism. You and Father Peter Hears are my go-to. After church and the saints, of course, but your song Pentecostal cracks me up. Thank you. And shout out to Dr. Evo and Ozzy for that one. Or Dr. E, I don't think Ozzy did that, but Dr. Evo's great producer there. A lot of these recent jams wouldn't even exist without his production work. Zane, what's up? He says, let's go, boys. And he does the wiggle laugh. Uh-oh. Did I do a racism? Can Trent Horn expose me for doing a racism? D. Zorbs, $5. Too bad Jordan Maxwell wasn't around to decipher. To decipher the Epstein files, you have to look at the names and the colors that are used and to turn them into the opposite of what they are. Namely, a pterodactyl conspiracy. Sneed, $5. I have a screen recording of the video proof that G Lane is a thing cover for Wayfair. Why don't you just try to put that on Twitter? I mean, why are you trying to? I don't really do people trying to send me secret information. Just put it up publicly, dog. Fishy Fillmore's $2. Is there a black pope? Yeah, kind of. I don't know if they're like literally calling the shots, but I mean, the Jesuits do have a head of the order, which historically has had varying degrees of power. I guess it's debatable to what degree they had power, but yes and no. All right. I think we're getting towards the Weave Stico, $7. Not to mention a 125-pound UFC fighter could kill a bodybuilder. Yeah, good point. So just being a buff gay dude doesn't actually make you a masculine killer, to rebut some of what Trent Horn was saying. Question, do you think Codriano was overrated? I just don't know a lot about that. It's not a topic I haven't had much time to get into Romanian Iron Guard, so it's not, I just don't know much about it. Francis, $3. I was born and raised Catholic. I was in a monastery even for some years and went down the Sedevacantis track, and then I realized it's crazy. I'm now Orthodox. Everything makes much more sense. Thank you. That's great to hear. That's the kind of good news I like to hear. Helped me a lot hearing your backstory. God bless you and your family. Thanks, man. Appreciate that, Francis. Daniel, $5. When you were talking to Jake about Epstein and that he got promoted at Bear Stearns because he had insider information, I think that's what happened. I mean, that seems to be the way Whitney Webb describes it in that early chapter. This would make me think of Wall Street, but your stream from 2 years ago about the movie Wall Street is Vindicated. Thank you. I forgot we even did a Wall Street stream, but yeah, we talked about that with Jake Shields yesterday. Ooh, here we go. Fat Super Chat. Ryder G says for $100. Jay, I love your work. You're the number one reason I became Orthodox. Your knowledge, your insight are actually invaluable. Without a father figure, I look up to you in that way. Well, I'm definitely not a very good father figure, but I guess I can be a sort of pale reflection of a father. Ooh, your father figure. What's that, George Michael? We don't want it to be in the George Michael sense because that sounds kind of gay, but it's got a good rhythm and melody. But the lyrics, if you pay attention, this is kind of gay, dude. I will be your father figure. Put your tiny hands in mine. I will be the one who loves you till the end of time. Well, shout out to Ryder G for $100. Thank you so much, dog. Bird says the best hood movie is I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. Thank you guys. We are gonna be. I'm gonna snatch us for $10. Was Epstein LARPing? I don't think you're LARPing if you're like engaged in the stuff that came out the last 2 days. That's not LARPing. That's serious evil, dude. Like the most evil shit you can do. And you know, for people to defend that, to cover up for that, that makes me say they're trash people. And maybe in the case of you know, Trent, maybe he just doesn't even want to look at that because he's too scared of where that would go. But you know what? It's what's out there. So I'm not gonna act like or cover up prelates or the Vatican or any of these scum because that's my religion. I got to cover up for them. That's evil. You're making yourself a moral sort of accessory. Not saying that Trent did anything actually like that. I'm saying that to cope and defend these people who are absolute just demons, to me, makes that person a garbage person. Thanks, Christopher Scott. He says for $10, thank you, Jay. I'm a slow boy. I get 10% of what you talk about. Thank you to Jim Bob. Thank you to Andrew. I'll be in the church around Pascha. Hey, that's great, man. It's good to hear that. God bless you. Do you think credit unions will exist after the Great Reset? Good question. I don't know, man. I'm just ready for Bitcoin to become the norm. I don't even know about this boomer shit. Like banks and credit unions, that's all boomer to me, dude. Guys, get ready. We'll be back over here with Tristan in just a few moments. Don't go anywhere.